If one could stand outside of time for a moment and gaze upon the Earth not as a planet but as a story, its patterns would appear like sentences written in light and shadow. The continents would be its paragraphs, the rivers its flowing ink, the atmosphere its soft breath whispering across each page. There would be no beginning or end, no single author nor final word, only a continuous unfolding, each moment editing the last, each movement of wind or wave adding a new thought to the grand manuscript of existence. Time would not hurry, nor would it hesitate. It would write in patience, in the slow dance of creation and erosion, in cycles so vast that the human heart can only sense them in dreams. Imagine watching that story from afar. From the dark stillness of space, Earth glows softly, as if lit from within by memory. Oceans swirl like liquid mirrors, reflecting light that left the sun 8 minutes ago, while clouds drift lazily across continents, turning day into silver shadow. Each current of air, each pulse of water carries the trace of everything that has come before: the dust of mountains ground to sand, the remains of ancient forests carried to sea, the breath of creatures long vanished. The planet remembers itself in motion, rewriting its history with every turn. It is a quiet story, yet endless one that began before language, before life, and will continue long after words have fallen silent. In the earliest chapters, the handwriting of time was fire. The surface boiled and churned, shaping itself out of chaos, its molten seas glowing like living script across the void. Gravity was the first editor, pulling fragments together, sculpting form from the raw material of stars long dead. From this cosmic dust, structure was born: continents, oceans, and sky arranged like paragraphs that would one day be read by living eyes. And when the first waters cooled and gathered in basins of stone, the ink of life began to flow. Tiny reactions stirred in, the deep molecules aligning, splitting, reaching, combining a grammar of chemistry that became the first breath of creation. Time is not a straight line, but a looping rhythm, and the Earth has always written itself in cycles. The rise of mountains and their erosion into plains, the blooming of forests and their quiet return to soil, the birth of a species and its passing into dust, each is a verse in the same song. Even extinction is not an ending, but a change in phrasing. Out of the remnants of what was, something new finds shape. The planet edits itself endlessly, removing and rewriting, yet never losing meaning. The fossils in stone are not forgotten sentences. They are annotations, reminders that every moment, no matter how small, contributes to the great text of being. And within this story, humanity appeared a brief, luminous word written near the present edge of the page. We came from the dust and water, formed by the same processes that shaped the stars. Our ancestors looked up at the night sky and recognized patterns, not realizing they were seeing their own reflection in distant light. We gave names to constellations, wrote myths, and measured the passage of the sun across the horizon. In doing so, we began to read the story we were already inside of. The soil beneath our feet became our history book, the sky our unending library, and in that moment of recognition, time gained a witness, a consciousness capable of wondering about the author of all things. But time, perhaps, is not an author in the way we imagine. It does not choose its subjects or plan its outcomes. It simply moves an endless motion that allows possibility to bloom wherever conditions permit. In the same way that wind sculpts dunes without intention, time shapes existence through repetition and variation. Yet within that movement lies something deeply poetic, an inherent order, an unspoken balance between chaos and structure. Every orbit of a planet, every cycle of tide, every heartbeat is part of this same harmony. When we listen to the world, truly listen, we hear it in the rustle of leaves, the crashing of waves, the slow settling of twilight over the land. It is the sound of the story continuing, wordless and eternal. To think of the Earth as a story is to remember that we are not separate from its telling. The air that fills our lungs has passed through countless generations of life, through forests and oceans, through the breath of creatures long gone. The water we drink has been ice, vapor, rain, and river countless times. The minerals in our bones were forged in stars billions of years before our birth. We are made of the same ink that writes the mountains and clouds, and through us the planet continues its narrative of transformation. Our actions, both gentle and destructive, become part of that unfolding. When we plant a seed, when we light a fire, when we speak, We alter the rhythm of the Earth's prose. The story absorbs everything. It forgets nothing. There is something soothing in this awareness. To live within a tale so vast and interconnected is to feel the weight of time not as burden but as belonging. The worries that fill our brief lives, our struggles, ambitions and fears, are like small annotations in the margin of a cosmic book, important in their intimacy yet humbly placed within the whole. Each life adds texture, nuance, and meaning to the great body of the Earth's experience. Even when we are gone, our atoms return to the narrative, becoming dust, seed, wind or light never lost, only rewritten. When night falls and the stars emerge, we find ourselves reading again the slow, silent sentences of the cosmos written in light. The constellations tell stories older than humanity, of creation and destruction, of time's rhythm echoing through infinity. Yet even those distant suns are temporary, destined to fade and transform. Their endings will seed new beginnings, just as the ashes of one forest nourish the growth of another. The story never stops. It breathes through every form, seen and unseen, weaving continuity through change. If one listens closely, there is a pulse beneath everything faint but steady. It is the heartbeat of time, the rhythm by which all things live and return. It moves through stone and ocean, through root and sky, through every living thing, and if one is still enough, it can be felt within one's own chest. A gentle reminder that we are the story, that our existence is a verse written by the same hand that stirs the galaxies. So this introduction does not begin the story, nor does it try to define it. It simply opens the page, allowing awareness to settle upon the realization that the world we inhabit is alive with meaning. The Earth is writing, endlessly, through the quiet patience of time. Mountains will rise and fall, oceans will change their shape, and stars will come and go, yet the rhythm will continue, a soft pulse of creation echoing through eternity. And somewhere within that rhythm, among wind and stone, light and breath, the story will keep unfolding, word by word, moment by moment, a tale without an ending, written by time itself. 1. A quiet beginning, the breath of time. Before there was sound, before there was motion, before even the faintest pulse of light, there was silence. Not the kind of silence we know, not the hush between breaths or the pause between waves, but a deeper, quiet, beyond all measure. It was a stillness that contained everything and nothing at once. From that immeasurable calm, time exhaled for the first time, and with that exhalation the universe began to unfold. In this still and endless moment, the boundaries between what was and what would be had not yet formed. Space had not stretched, and matter had not gathered. There was only the possibility of becoming an infinite, unshaped potential, suspended in the darkness. And then, in a single, luminous instant, the first spark flickered into being. The universe began not with a roar, but with a breath, the breath of time itself. From that first breath came expansion. The young universe swelled outward in every direction, carrying with it the seeds of everything that would ever exist, every atom, every star, every thought that would one day take form. This expansion was not a journey through space, but the very creation of space itself, the unfolding of a vast invisible canvas on which time would begin to write. As the minutes of creation stretched into ages, the newborn cosmos was filled with heat and light. Particles danced in an ocean of energy, colliding, merging and separating in a rhythm as old as time. The universe was young, chaotic and radiant, yet within that chaos, a delicate balance began to emerge. Hydrogen and helium, the simplest elements, were born in those first few moments. These were the first letters in time's alphabet, the building blocks from which all stories, including Earth's, would one day be written. Slowly, the universe began to cool. What had once been a sea of blinding light grew dimmer, softer, and gentler. Matter began to gather under the quiet persuasion of gravity, that patient hand which time uses to shape its creations. Invisible threads pulled particles together, drawing them into clusters that would become galaxies. Within these great spirals of dust and gas, stars began to ignite like words appearing on a dark page. Each star was a spark of continuity, a bright paragraph in the long and ongoing narrative of creation. Within their cores, the stars burned hydrogen into heavier elements, weaving new possibilities from the simplest materials. When those stars lived out their lives and faded, They scattered their contents into the cosmos, seeding it with the raw ingredients for worlds yet unimagined. Iron, carbon, oxygen, calcium, all the elements of life and stone drifted through space like punctuation marks waiting to find their place in a sentence. Time flowed quietly, marking the rhythm of cosmic change. Galaxies swirled like eddies in a vast cosmic sea, each one a library of countless stars. The story of existence deepened with every rotation, every collapse, every spark reborn in the darkness. Across billions of years, the universe settled into a graceful structure, a living balance of creation and dissolution. And somewhere within one of those galaxies, a modest spiral adrift in the quiet, a small star was born. Around it circled a cloud of dust and gas, drawn together by gravity's careful touch. Over countless ages, this cloud began to shape itself into planets, moons, and asteroids. Among them was one small sphere of molten rock and metal that would, in time, become Earth. At first, this world was nothing more than chaos and fire, a storm of elements colliding, melting, reforming, and cooling in endless repetition. Volcanoes tore through its surface, oceans of magma surged beneath a thin and shifting crust, and the air itself was thick with gases that shimmered in the early heat. Yet even in this turmoil, there was purpose. The handwriting of time was already visible patterns of cause and consequence, erosion and renewal written across the face of this new world. The moon, Earth's companion, was born from this same chaos. A collision with a wandering body cast molten fragments into orbit, where gravity gathered them into a sphere of pale stone. Together, Earth and Moon began their long dance, a partnership of light and tide, silence and reflection. Their relationship would shape the rhythm of oceans, the tilt of seasons, and the pace of time itself on this young planet. As Earth cooled, steam condensed into water, and rain began to fall for the first time. It fell for centuries, perhaps for millennia, until it filled the low places and carved the first oceans. In those waters, time began to slow its pace. The surface of the planet shimmered with storms and lightning, but below, in the depths, the story of life was being written in invisible ink. From the elements came molecules, and from molecules, patterns. These patterns folded and combined, linking together in countless arrangements. Some dissolved, some endured, and some began to replicate. It was through this repetition, this persistence of form, that the first living systems emerged. In these minute beginnings, the story of life began to whisper across the world's surface. Time, always patient, watched as complexity grew. The planet's crust shifted, its continents formed, and the oceans deepened. Each change was a sentence in a story that had no beginning and no end, only transformation. The earliest cells appeared like punctuation marks in this slow and rhythmic prose, signaling the arrival of a new kind of order. These tiny, fragile structures held within them the capacity to grow, divide, and remember a biological memory that would carry forward through every generation to come. Meanwhile, the planet itself continued to evolve. The skies cleared, sunlight filtered through the atmosphere, and the world began to breathe. Volcanoes exhaled gases that would one day sustain life, while the oceans absorbed carbon and released oxygen in turn. Earth was not simply a stage for life to unfold upon, it was a participant in its own creation, a living manuscript written by the steady motion of time. If one could stand outside of this process, outside of time itself, and watch Earth's story from beginning to now, it would seem like a slow, graceful unfolding. Each geological age, each rise and fall of species, would resemble the turning of a page. Mountains would rise like sentences growing in strength, then crumble softly into valleys, their words worn down but never lost. Rivers would carve paths across the continents, rewriting the landscape again and again, as though nature were revising its own text. And, through it all, time would continue to breathe quietly, evenly, endlessly. It does not hurry, and it does not rest. It is both the author and the book, the motion and the memory, the pulse within every atom and the stillness beyond every star. As night falls across the modern world, that same quiet presence remains. The atoms in your body once drifted in that ancient cloud of starlight. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen you breathe, all of it was written long before Earth was cool enough to bear your form. You are a continuation of that same unfolding sentence, a small but essential part of time's grand narration. So, as you listen and drift toward rest, imagine yourself floating in that first silence again, before stars, before oceans, before words. Feel the slow, unbroken rhythm of time around you, ancient and patient. It has been breathing since the first moment of creation, and it will continue to breathe long after every story has been told. In its quiet, the universe still writes, and tonight, as you close your eyes, you return softly to that endless beginning, to the breath of time itself. 2. The blank page of the universe. In the earliest whisper of existence, there was no colour, no shape, no sound, only an expanding silence so immense it seemed to echo within itself. The universe, still young and formless, was like a page awaiting its first mark, a vast sheet of invisible parchment stretching in every direction. On this blank page, time had only just begun to write. The first words were not made of ink or language, but of light, heat, and the quiet gathering of matter in the endless dark. In that beginning, the universe was a sea of possibilities. Energy and matter were not yet distinct things. They were one and the same, moving together in a restless dance. The entire cosmos was compact and hot beyond imagination, denser than anything we can conceive. As it expanded, the heat began to drift away, like breath, fading into cool air. Space stretched wider and wider, and with it, time itself stretched too. Every passing moment marked a new sentence written on this infinite page, each atom a letter, each particle a mark of creation's quiet intention. In the first few seconds of this great unfolding, the simplest elements came into being. Hydrogen, helium, and traces of lithium, the barest ingredients of all future worlds, drifted through the cosmic ocean. There were no stars yet, no galaxies, no planets to hold these elements close. Instead, they floated freely, illuminated only by the faint afterglow of the beginning. The universe, in its infancy, was an expanse of quiet simplicity, and time moved gently, testing its own rhythm. For hundreds of millions of years, darkness filled the expanding void. It was a darkness not of emptiness, but of waiting. In that stillness, gravity began its patient work. Where matter was just a little denser, where clouds of hydrogen gathered slightly closer together, gravity whispered and pulled. The blank page of the cosmos began to take form. As invisible patterns appeared, threads of attraction weaving across unimaginable distances. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, matter gathered into clusters, and those clusters began to shine. The first stars were born like sparks in the blackness. They flared to life with brilliance and heat, scattering light across the dark canvas. The universe, once silent, now had rhythm and pulse, the steady heartbeat of fusion. Inside those stars, new elements began to form. Carbon, oxygen, iron. The vocabulary of life was being written for the first time. Each star became a word in time's unfolding sentence, its light carrying across the vast distances as though illuminating the first paragraphs of a cosmic story. The darkness between stars did not vanish. It deepened and expanded, filled with the faint hum of energy and the subtle echo of creation. This interplay of light and shadow gave the universe its first structure, galaxies spiraling into being, clusters forming along invisible filaments, all connected by gravity's unseen hand. The blank page was no longer empty. It was alive with motion, colour, and the gentle turning of time's pen. Imagine watching from beyond the stars, looking down upon that young universe. You would see not chaos but balance, light blooming, fading, and returning in cycles. New stars ignited as old ones died, scattering their contents across the void. The deaths of these first stars were not endings but beginnings. Their remains seeded the next generation of stars with richer elements, each new life brighter and more complex than the last. The blank page was rewriting itself constantly, a living manuscript shaped by destruction as much as by creation. Among the swirling galaxies that now filled the sky, one small spiral would one day host a quiet, unremarkable star, the Sunday. But for now, it existed only as possibility, as a line yet to be written. Billions of years would pass before the dust of older stars gathered to form it. Time was in no hurry. It wrote with patience and grace, allowing every particle to find its place. The cosmic story was vast, and every letter mattered. As the universe aged, its expansion continued. The fabric of space stretched thinner, and the light of distant stars began to dim, travelling farther and slower through the widening dark. Yet even as the distances grew, the story's coherence remained. Galaxies moved apart like paragraphs drifting across an endless scroll, but their connection to one another was never truly lost. The same laws that shaped the first stars continued to guide every new formation, every collision, every pulse of light. In the spaces between galaxies, energy flowed in silence. Invisible waves of radiation filled the void, carrying with them the faint echo of the universe's first moments. Even now, billions of years later, that echo lingers, a soft, background hum that astronomers can still detect. It is the residue of the beginning, the faint signature of time's first line written across the fabric of space. To listen to it is to hear the universe remembering its own birth. The blank page of the cosmos was not truly blank after all. Every atom, every photon, every movement of gravity was a form of writing. The stars were sentences, the galaxies, chapters, and time, endlessly flowing, was the author who never stopped revising. Each new age built upon the last, carrying forward the memory of what had been. Matter, light, and energy existed in constant conversation, an ongoing exchange between creation and transformation. In this dialogue, balance was everything. The stars consumed hydrogen, burning it into heavier elements. When their fuel ran out, they collapsed or exploded, scattering their remains into the next generation of stars and worlds. Through this cycle, the universe began to build complexity. The simple became intricate, and the blankness of space grew dense with meaning. Like a story that deepens with every retelling, the cosmos layered its history upon itself, each event shaping the next. Somewhere within this expanding manuscript, in a distant corner of a spiral galaxy, a small cloud of dust began to swirl. It rotated slowly, flattening into a disk as gravity drew it tighter and tighter. At its center, a new star kindled, its light pushing back the darkness nearby. Around it, fragments of matter began to collide, merge, and coalesce. This was the earliest form of our solar system, the next page in time's story, waiting to unfold. The young star shone with quiet determination, its heat illuminating the dust that surrounded it. Within that dust were particles of carbon, silicon, iron, and oxygen, all born from the long ancestry of stars that had lived and died before it. Over millions of years, these particles began to gather into larger bodies, forming planets, moons, and asteroids. Among them was one small world, placed at a distance where warmth and cold were balanced, where oceans could one day shimmer under light, and life might take hold. That world was Earth, though at this stage it was still molten, glowing, and unformed. Its surface churned with volcanoes and storms of fire, while its atmosphere was thick and raw. Yet even in this early chaos, the signature of time's writing could be felt. Gravity sculpted mountains from molten stone, cooling rains began to fall, and oceans whispered their first beginnings. From the blank page of the universe, a single story had emerged, the story of a small world in a quiet corner of a vast galaxy. It was not yet conscious of itself, not yet aware that it was being written, but the rhythm of time continued, steady and unbroken. Each second built upon the last, turning emptiness into order, darkness into light, silence into the faint hum of creation. If you close your eyes now, you can almost feel it, the long, slow unfolding of everything that ever was. You can imagine the first stars shimmering like words across a dark expanse, their light still travelling through space, reaching you even now. The air you breathe carries atoms once born inside those ancient suns. The calcium in your bones, the carbon in your breath, the iron in your blood, all were written on that first cosmic page. And so, as time continues to flow, the universe continues to write. Every particle, every living being, every flicker of thought is part of the same ongoing story, a single sentence stretched across billions of years. The blank page was never empty. It was simply waiting, patient and still, for time to begin its first line. 3. Ink made of stars. Every story needs an ink, something that carries its words forward, something that gives form to the invisible thoughts of its author. For the universe, that ink was not made of pigment or paper, but of fire. It was written in the language of light. The stars were the quills of time itself, burning their messages into the darkness. Each one glowed with quiet purpose, weaving a luminous thread through the deep fabric of space. The first stars were immense, far larger than those that shine in the night sky today. They burned fiercely, consuming their fuel in brief and brilliant lives. In their hearts, the simplest elements, hydrogen and helium, fused together under crushing pressure, forming heavier elements with every heartbeat. Carbon, oxygen, iron, and gold, the very materials of worlds and bodies and breath, were born in those bright interiors. Every flicker of starlight was a syllable of creation. When those first stars exhausted their fuel, they ended in vast explosions. The silence of space was broken by waves of light and energy that swept outward, scattering dust and elements far across the cosmos. This was time's punctuation, the moment between one sentence and the next. From each death, new beginnings emerged. The scattered remains of those stars became the raw material for future generations, for galaxies and planets yet unborn. The universe, once sparse and dark, was now thick with the dust of these fallen stars. Clouds of gas and debris drifted through the void, gathering slowly under the pull of gravity. Within these clouds, new stars began to form, smaller, steadier, more patient. They burned longer and more quietly, allowing the story of the cosmos to unfold at a gentler pace. Around them, disks of dust circled, and from those disks, worlds began to coalesce. The stars provided both the ink and the warmth for this cosmic script. In time, entire galaxies filled with these stellar storytellers. Spiral arms glittered with billions of suns, each one illuminating its own small corner of eternity. The light they cast travelled across unimaginable distances, crossing centuries before reaching another world, another set of eyes capable of perceiving it. Even now, when we gaze upward into the night, we are reading messages written long ago. The stars we see are not as they are, but as they were, their light carrying ancient stories across the slow river of time. Every atom within you, every molecule that forms your skin, your breath, your bones, once belonged to a star. The iron in your blood was forged in stellar furnaces that collapsed before the Earth was even born. The calcium that shapes your skeleton was written in light billions of years ago. You are, in every sense, made of the ink of stars. Their fire became your form, their death made your life possible. When you breathe, you are repeating the words they once wrote. For billions of years, this stellar process continued. Stars were born, lived, and died, endlessly rewriting the universe. Galaxies collided and merged, scattering their stars into new patterns. Entire systems vanished, while others came into being. The cosmic text was never static. It evolved, deepened, and expanded. What began as a handful of elements in the earliest stars became a symphony of chemistry, a growing vocabulary of materials that could build oceans, continents, and the fragile structures of life. Within one quiet arm of a galaxy, a small, stable star emerged from such a cloud of dust. It was neither the largest nor the brightest, but it possessed a rare balance. Its light was steady, its heat constant. Around it, matter began to gather, forming a thin disk that rotated slowly in the dark. Tiny grains of dust clung together, drawn by invisible forces. They collided, merged, and grew first into pebbles, then boulders, and then worlds. It was from this slow and patient dance that our sun and its planets were born. As the newborn sun ignited, it shone upon a family of forming worlds. Closest to it were small rocky planets, their surfaces still molten, glowing with the heat of their creation. Farther out, massive gas giants took shape, surrounded by icy moons. Among them, at a distance just right for liquid water to exist, the particular world began to cool. It was small and fragile, covered in storms and fire, but it held the potential for something remarkable. That world was Earth, and it would soon become one of time's most intricate and beautiful stories. The ingredients that made this planet, the iron in its core, the silicon in its crust, the oxygen in its air, all came from stars that had lived and died long before. The ink of those ancient suns was pressed into the stone and soil of this new world. When Earth finally formed a solid crust, when oceans began to collect, and when the air cleared enough for light to reach the surface, the universe had completed one of its longest and most delicate sentences. It was a pause between the fire of stars and the first whisper of life. Imagine for a moment what that might have looked like. The newborn Earth turning slowly in the blackness, wrapped in clouds of steam and smoke. The sun glowed faintly through a haze of dust, its light reflecting across oceans of molten rock. Comets passed silently overhead, carrying ice and carbon fragments of other stars, other stories. Every drop of water, every crystal of salt, every atom of air was a gift from distant fires. The earth was written in the same language as the stars themselves, but it would soon begin to write in a voice of its own. As time unfolded, the surface of the planet cooled further. Rain began to fall, first in steam, then in liquid form. For centuries, perhaps millennia, it fell without ceasing, carving rivers and valleys, collecting into vast oceans. In these waters, the ink of stars mingled with the chemistry of Earth, creating the conditions for life's first words. Hydrogen and carbon met in the dark, forming patterns that grew more complex with every passing age. The story that began with fire was now being told in water. Every star that had come before, every supernova that had scattered its contents into space, had unknowingly prepared for this moment. The calcium, the carbon, the nitrogen, and the oxygen. The essential elements of living things had travelled across the cosmos for billions of years to find one another again in this small blue world. Time had gathered its ingredients carefully, blending them with precision, allowing chance to become purpose. Life, when it appeared, was not an interruption of the cosmic story but its continuation. The stars still watched, their light falling softly across the surface of this new world. The same energy that had forged them now warmed the young Earth. The same cycles of creation and destruction that shaped them continued here, in subtler forms, in wind, in water, in growth. The fire that once blazed across the cosmos now flickered in the gentle pulse of living cells. Time's ink had changed colour, but its meaning remained. When you look up at the night sky, you are not looking away from home, you are looking into your origin. Every light above you is a reminder of where your story began. The atoms within you have travelled across vast expanses of time to reach this moment. The starlight you see is not a distant phenomenon but a reflection of your own substance, your own history written in fire. You are both the reader and the text, the continuation of an idea begun before the earth even cooled. The universe continues to write. Stars are still born and still die, scattering their luminous ink into new clouds that will one day form new worlds. Somewhere, perhaps far away, other planets are cooling, oceans are forming, and time is preparing to write new stories upon their surfaces. The process never ends, it only changes shape. The ink of stars flows through everything, through galaxies, through oceans, through the quiet rhythm of your breathing. It is the same ink that painted the first sunrise, that shines in every night sky, that glows softly within the atoms of your blood. And as you rest, you are part of that vast, unbroken sentence, a line written in starlight, drifting gently through the pages of time. 4. The birth of a world. In the quiet after the fires of creation, when the dust of dying stars had drifted into spirals and gathered under the slow pull of gravity, a small region of a young galaxy began to glow with new light. A star was forming a modest one, golden and calm compared to the brilliant giants that had come before. Around it swirled a wide, gentle disk of gas and dust, turning endlessly, a halo of possibilities waiting to take shape. From this cloud, drawn together by time's patient hand, a world was about to be born. In the beginning there was only chaos, fragments of rock, ice and metal, colliding and merging in the soft gravity of the solar disk. These collisions were quiet on the scale of eternity, though in their moment they were full of fire. Each impact released heat. Each union made something slightly larger, slightly rounder. Over countless millions of years, these fragments became bodies, small planets, and asteroids, forming and reforming in a slow, spiraling dance. It was a choreography guided by physics but written in poetry, a kind of celestial rhythm that would eventually give rise to the Earth. The young planet began as nothing more than a sphere of molten stone. Its surface churned and boiled, glowing red under the light of the newborn Sunday. Volcanoes erupted without pause, covering the landscape with rivers of fire. The air was thick with steam and gas, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen, and the faint traces of water vapour. There was no sky as we know it, only a veil of heat and ash. The Earth at this stage was not a world but a work in progress, a paragraph still being written by the invisible pen of time. As it turned slowly in the dark, the planet's molten surface began to cool. The outer crust solidified first, forming a thin, fragile shell of rock that cracked and shifted as the world continued to heave beneath it. Beneath that shell, the mantle flowed, like slow glass, and deeper still, the core burned with liquid metal. This hidden heart spun within, creating the magnetic field that would one day protect the surface from the harshness of space. The Earth was beginning to organize itself to find structure amid chaos, rhythm within motion. Not far away, another event shaped its destiny. A massive body, perhaps the size of Mars, struck the young Earth at a shallow angle. The impact was cataclysmic. It tore away a vast portion of the planet's outer layers, scattering molten rock into orbit. For a time, the sky glowed with fragments, a ring of incandescent debris circling above the fiery world. Slowly, over months or years, that ring began to gather, forming a smaller companion, a pale, silent sphere that would become the moon. The presence of the moon changed everything. Its gravity steadied the young planet's spin, stabilizing its tilt and giving rhythm to the passage of days and seasons. Its tidal pull stirred the molten surface and, later, the oceans, weaving a slow and constant pattern of motion into Earth's evolving story. In the long nights that followed, the moon hung in the sky as both witness and partner, the first mirror, reflecting the faint light of the newborn sun across the dark face of the planet. As the violence of formation eased, the surface continued to cool. Rain began to fall first as steam condensing into mist, then as heavy, endless downpour. It rained for centuries, perhaps thousands of years, the drops hissing as they struck the hot rock, rising again as vapor, falling once more. In this endless cycle, the first oceans began to collect in the planet's low places. What had once been rivers of fire became basins of water, shimmering under a dim and clouded sky. The Earth's temperature slowly found balance, and a fragile crust formed a skin over the restless world below. These first oceans were dark and hot, full of minerals drawn from the volcanic rock. Lightning flashed through the thick air, and in the waters, chemistry began to stir. Molecules collided and combined, forming ever more complex arrangements. The elements of life, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, mingled like notes in an unwritten melody. Though no life existed yet, the stage was being set. Time had provided the materials. Now it waited for the right moment for the story of living things to begin. The sky was not yet blue. The atmosphere remained dense and hazy, a mixture of gases that would be poisonous to us now but that nurtured the young Earth's transformation. Sunlight filtered through in faint reddish hues, giving the world a constant twilight. The surface was still restless, shaped by volcanoes and meteor strikes, but already patterns were forming, continents beginning to rise, seas carving their borders, air and water shaping stone. The planet had found its rhythm. Beneath the crust, the mantle moved in slow convection, carrying heat from the core outward. This movement, steady and invisible, began to drive the first cycles of tectonic motion. The continents drifted across the molten foundation, colliding and breaking apart even in these earliest days. Each collision created mountains, each separation gave birth to new oceans. The Earth's surface became a living map, rewritten constantly by the deep currents below. In this movement, time found one of its most elegant ways to record itself, a shifting story written in stone. Though life had not yet arrived, the ingredients were already there, waiting in the darkness. The oceans were rich with potential, warmed by geothermal vents that poured minerals and heat into their depths. Here, chemistry began to weave its first threads. Simple compounds formed membranes, chains, and loops, linking together in ways that hinted at what was to come. These were the quiet rehearsals before the first performance, the early sentences that would one day become the epic of life. Above the oceans, lightning continued to flicker through the clouds. Each flash of energy sparked new combinations of matter, a constant experiment written across the sky. In the thin line between water and air, the chemistry of life was assembling itself with the same patience that had shaped the stars. Nothing hurried, nothing was wasted. Every molecule found its place, guided by the quiet logic of time. Over millions of years, the Earth grew calmer, the bombardments from space lessened, and the planet's surface began to settle. Oceans spread wider, and the first outlines of continents became more defined. The sun grew brighter, its light reaching through thinning clouds to touch the waves. The atmosphere, still heavy with carbon dioxide and methane, began to trap heat, creating a gentle greenhouse that kept the oceans from freezing. The balance between warmth and coolness, chaos and calm, began to stabilize. The Earth at last was ready to support something new. Every element, every molecule, every grain of sand had a story stretching back to the stars. The calcium that would one day form shells and bones came from ancient suns. The carbon that would fuel forests and bodies was forged in stellar cores long vanished. Even the water that now filled the seas may have come from comets, frozen messengers carrying the remains of older worlds. Time had taken all of these fragments and blended them into something coherent, something alive with potential. If you could stand on the surface of that early Earth, you would see a landscape both beautiful and strange. The sky would shimmer in shades of copper and gold, the oceans would steam, and the air would tremble with energy. Beneath the waves, unseen in the depths, the earliest forms of chemistry would be preparing to cross a threshold that had never been crossed before. From simple molecules, something living would emerge, delicate, improbable, and yet inevitable. The world was no longer a blank page. It had color, motion, rhythm, and texture. It had storms and seasons, mountains and seas. The fires of its birth had given way to the gentle balance of air and water. Time had turned chaos into structure, silence into music. The earth was still young, still raw, but it had taken shape. And as it turned beneath the faint light of the sun, with the moon tracing its silver arc above, the stage was set for the next chapter, when the story of life itself would begin to write upon the world that time had so carefully made. 5. The oceans begin to speak. When the long storms finally grew quiet and the endless rains began to ease, the newborn oceans of Earth rested beneath a dim and hazy sky. They were deep and warm, stretching across the planet in shifting shades of grey and green. Steam still rose where the heat of the inner world met the cooling surface, and volcanic islands dotted the horizon like punctuation marks on a blank page. It was here, in these vast, quiet waters, that the next sentence of Earth's story began to form. The oceans, newly born and restless, were about to find their voice. At first, these waters were heavy, with minerals drawn from the dissolving crust. Iron, sulfur, and carbon drifted freely within them, carried by currents that moved with slow, hypnotic rhythm. Lightning flashed in the clouds above, striking the surface again and again, releasing bursts of energy that reached deep into the liquid dark. Each flash was a spark of possibility, stirring the chemical alphabet that time had been gathering since the birth of the planet. In these waters, the raw materials of life swirled together, connecting, separating, and connecting again. No eyes yet existed to see this, no minds to imagine it. The process unfolded in silence, guided only by the quiet laws of chemistry and chance. Molecules assembled like soft whispers, carbon chains linking with hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, forming compounds that could store energy, react with one another, and endure. These were not yet alive, not yet aware, but they represented the threshold between inanimate matter and the beginnings of life. In this gentle and patient experiment, time became both artist and author, shaping the formless into form. Beneath the waves, near the edges of volcanic vents, the temperature of the water shifted between scalding heat and cold darkness. Minerals spilled from cracks in the seafloor, forming tall chimneys of stone and metal. Around them, microscopic reactions took place in the narrow space where heat met cool, where order met chaos. These natural laboratories became the first writing desks of the world, the places where time began to inscribe the opening lines of life's long narrative. Among the swirling minerals, small structures formed thin membranes that could trap and protect chemical reactions within them. They floated like tiny bubbles, fragile but persistent, each one containing a small experiment in complexity. Some burst and vanished, others divided and drifted apart, carrying their contents into the surrounding sea. Over millions of years, these little pockets of order began to stabilize, adapting to the shifting conditions around them. Slowly, the first primitive cells began to take shape, built from the same elements that had once burned in the hearts of stars. These cells were simple, but they carried something extraordinary, the ability to make copies of themselves. Within their delicate membranes, Molecules of RNA and later DNA began to store instructions like a memory written in code. The story that had begun with fire and stone now found a way to remember itself. Every replication was a sentence repeated, every mutation a small edit in the growing manuscript of life. The oceans had found their language, and they began to speak it softly through the rhythm of division and renewal. From this point forward, life became inseparable from water. The oceans nurtured it, protected it from the harsh sunlight and cosmic radiation that still bombarded the young planet. Each new generation of microscopic organisms inherited the lessons of the last, refining their chemistry, learning to draw energy from their surroundings. Some harnessed the heat of hydrothermal vents, others found nourishment in the minerals dissolved in seawater. Time watched, patient as ever, as the experiment continued to unfold. Gradually, these early forms of life began to influence the world around them. The chemistry of the oceans shifted, as living cells consumed some substances and released others. Oxygen, at first only a trace element, began to appear in tiny amounts, produced by new kinds of microorganisms that used sunlight to power their reactions. These were the first photosynthetic beings, tiny architects of the atmosphere, turning light into energy and water into air. It would take billions of years for oxygen to accumulate enough to change the world, but the process had begun, quietly and without fanfare, beneath the rolling surface of the sea. The oceans deepened their story with every wave. Currents circulated nutrients, carrying life from one place to another, ensuring that no single environment remained still for too long. Over time, communities of microorganisms formed simple networks of cooperation and competition, precursors to the complex ecosystems that would one day fill the land and sky. The surface of the planet, once dominated by volcanic fire, now shimmered with the quiet pulse of living chemistry. Imagine standing on the shore of that early world, though no shore then was gentle or green. The air would be heavy with vapor, the scent of minerals and salt thick in the breeze. The sky would glow a dull copper, and the horizon would ripple with the heat of distant vents. Beneath the surface, unseen and silent, the oceans would be alive with invisible movement, countless microscopic lives dividing, growing, and transforming. Each droplet of water would contain worlds within, worlds, each wave carrying the memory of creation's first rhythm. The process was slow, but time does not rush. It allowed life to experiment, to fail, to begin again. Each success was small, a slightly stronger membrane, a molecule that copied itself a bit more accurately, a reaction that captured a little more sunlight. But each success endured, passed down through the ages, shaping what came after. The oceans were patient teachers, and their lessons were endless. As the centuries turned to millennia and millennia to eons, the relationship between life and the ocean deepened. Organisms began to cluster, forming colonies, sharing nutrients and protection. Simple cooperation became the first hint of complexity. The seas glowed faintly with microscopic blooms, a new kind of light reflecting the dawn of biology. In the stillness of night, if one could have looked from afar, the planet might have seemed to shimmer from within, illuminated by the breath of the first living things. Slowly, the atmosphere above the oceans began to change. The gases released by volcanic eruptions mixed with those exhaled by life itself, forming layers that trapped warmth and filtered sunlight. The Earth's temperature stabilized, and weather began to form winds, rains, and currents that shaped the climate. The sky gradually lightened, and the sunlight reaching the surface grew softer. The oceans, once a place of chaos and storm, became calm enough to cradle life in abundance. It was in these waters that the foundation for all future existence was written. The DNA that formed here, the molecular scripts developed in the dark, would carry forward through every creature that would ever exist. Every tree, every bird, every human would one day trace its ancestry to these quiet oceans. Time's writing was permanent, each word carrying the meaning of those that came before. And yet, in the deep, the process continued without awareness. The oceans did not know they were writing the story of life. They simply moved and breathed, guided by tides, heat, and gravity. The cells they held divided endlessly, oblivious to their place in history. They were the purest expression of time's intention, not conscious, not purposeful, but inevitable. As the planet turned beneath its pale moon, As continents drifted slowly and the air grew clearer, the oceans continued to whisper. Their voice was not sound but rhythm, the motion of waves, the pulsing of tides, the quiet pattern of creation unfolding. In their depths, time found a mirror, and in that reflection, it saw continuity. The earth, once fire and stone, had become a living world. The oceans, vast and silent, carried within them everything that would ever be. They spoke the first words of life, not in language, but in pattern, not in sound, but in motion. Their story was written not on paper, but in salt and light and memory. And though ages would pass, and continents would rise, and beings would one day walk upon the land, every heartbeat would still echo their rhythm. The ocean spoke once, long ago, and the world has been listening ever since. 6. The first words of life. The world had grown quieter. The great storms that once ruled the newborn earth had begun to settle, and the oceans, deep, vast, and softly breathing, had become the planet's great reservoirs of potential. Beneath their surface, something remarkable was beginning to stir. The chemistry of existence, forged in the ancient fires of stars and tempered in the patient coolness of water, had reached a threshold. The long silence before the first living whisper was about to end. Time, which had spent billions of years preparing the stage, was ready to write the first words of life. It began so small that no human eye could have ever seen it, even if there had been eyes to see. In the depths of the sea, in the shadows of hydrothermal vents, and the soft glow of volcanic ridges, molecules drifted and collided. Carbon chains, twined with hydrogen and nitrogen, forming the first fragile frameworks of organic structure. Some broke apart as quickly as they formed, but others held together, bound by a quiet persistence. They captured a spark of energy, perhaps from lightning or heat, and something new emerged, a molecule that could copy itself. This simple act of replication was the beginning of memory. For the first time, the universe could remember its own pattern. Each copy carried the echo of the last, repeating the same information with minute imperfections that would one day give rise to diversity. What had been chemistry became continuity. These molecules, primitive ancestors of RNA, began to link together, forming long, winding chains that stored the instructions of their own making. It was as if time had found a way to write, not on rock or sky, but within the living water itself. From these molecules came boundaries. Fatty acids and lipids, shaped by the sea's chemistry, began to form membranes, tiny enclosures that separated the inside from the outside, creating the first delicate sense of self. Within these microscopic walls, reactions took place, protected from the chaos beyond. The early ocean was full of such bubbles, each one a small experiment in life's endless grammar. Some dissolved, others endured, and those that survived began to divide and grow, multiplying in ways that hinted at something astonishingly new. Inside these first cells, the rhythm of life began to pulse. They took in molecules from their surroundings, used energy to rebuild themselves, and passed on their blueprints to the next generation. Their replication was imperfect, but it was consistent enough to ensure survival. Mistakes became opportunities, variation became the raw material for evolution. Life was no longer a possibility, it was a process. The oceans had become not just the cradle of life, but its teacher, guiding it gently through trial and error toward greater complexity. The world, above these early oceans, was still harsh and unwelcoming. Lightning split the sky, and meteors occasionally struck with searing light. The continents were bare, their surfaces cracked and steaming, their air thick with volcanic gases. Yet below, shielded from destruction, life continued in its slow, quiet revolution. The first cells were simple, no nuclei, no organs, no senses, yet they were alive in the truest sense. They grew, they consumed, they multiplied. They were the first sentences written in the story of existence, each cell a phrase carrying the meaning of continuity. Time, ever patient, allowed these tiny forms to persist. They spread across the oceans, clinging to minerals, drifting through currents, thriving wherever conditions allowed. Some gathered near thermal vents, feeding on chemical gradients. Others floated freely near the surface, catching faint traces of sunlight filtering through the haze. In every drop of water, countless invisible dramas unfolded. Replication, mutation, adaptation. The script of life was being revised and refined with every passing moment. As ages turned into eons, some of these early organisms discovered a way to draw power directly from sunlight. This transformation, photosynthesis, was one of the most profound shifts in Earth's history. With it, life found a near-endless source of energy. The first photosynthetic bacteria captured light through pigments that absorbed the sun's rays and converted them into chemical energy. In the process, they released oxygen as a byproduct. It was an unintentional act that would one day transform the entire planet. At first, the oxygen simply dissolved in the water, reacting with iron and other minerals to form rust-colored sediments that settled to the ocean floor. Over millions of years, this slow process created vast layers of banded ironstone, now found in ancient rocks across the world. As oxygen continued to build, it began to accumulate in the atmosphere. The air that we, now, breathe, so vital to our existence, was born from the quiet labor of these unseen microscopic beings. The oceans, once silent, had begun to speak clearly, reshaping the world with every word. The emergence of oxygen was both creative and destructive. To the early organisms that had evolved in an oxygen-free world, it was toxic. Many perished in what biologists now call the Great Oxidation Event. Yet from that same transformation came opportunity. New forms of metabolism evolved, capable of using oxygen to extract far more energy from the same food. Life, once limited by its chemistry, suddenly had new room to grow. From this crisis arose resilience, and from resilience, complexity. Over time, cells learned to work together. Some formed colonies, where individuals cooperated for protection and shared nutrients. Others merged entirely, one cell living inside another in a partnership that would give rise to the first complex eukaryotic cells. These new cells carried internal structures, nuclei, mitochondria, chloroplasts that made them far more adaptable. The merging of once separate lives into a single entity marked a turning point. The story of life had entered a new chapter, one of cooperation and innovation. The oceans now shimmered with invisible abundance. The surface waters glowed with microbial blooms, each one a celebration of the sun's gift. Deep below, ancient forms still thrived in the darkness, feeding on heat and minerals as they had for billions of years. The planet was alive in every direction, from the surface to the seafloor, from the vents of volcanic ridges to the icy shallows near the poles. Time's ink flowed freely now, writing and rewriting with the steady hand of evolution. If one could see it from afar, Earth would have looked utterly transformed. The once hazy sky was beginning to clear, touched now with the faint blue that sunlight paints upon an oxygenated atmosphere. Clouds drifted softly across the surface, casting their fusor, shadows upon continents and seas. The planet breathed through its oceans, exhaling oxygen, inhaling carbon. Life had become the heartbeat of the world, each wave carrying the pulse of a billion unseen lives. And though it all unfolded without awareness, without intent, there was a sense of direction. From chemistry had come biology, from randomness had come resilience. The first words of life, spoken in the silent grammar of replication and adaptation, had set in motion a story that would stretch through every age to come. Each mutation, each success and failure, would carry forward into the future, shaping creatures, ecosystems, and ultimately, consciousness itself. Every living thing that exists now, every tree, every fish, every human being, is a continuation of that ancient experiment. The same spark that flickered in those early molecules still burns in us. The same code that replicated in the dark ocean still guides our cells today. We are, in a profound sense, extensions of that first whisper, the echo of the ocean's earliest words. As night settles over the modern world, and as the seas still move under the light of the moon, those first waters continue to sing in quiet rhythm. The chemistry that began their story never stopped. It lives in every tide, every current, every drop of rain that returns to the sea. The oceans, once silent and empty, became the voice of life itself. And though eons have passed, and continents have risen, and minds have learned to wonder, the song remains the same, soft, patient, eternal. The first words of life were not spoken aloud, yet they are still being said, carried on the breath of every living thing that has ever existed. 7. The poetry of evolution. When the first light touched the young oceans, The world had already been transformed by time's quiet patience. The earth, once only stone and storm, had become a living sphere. Beneath its waves, tiny cells floated and multiplied, each one carrying the ancient memory of creation within it. They were simple beings, unaware of themselves, yet through them, the planet had learned to breathe. These cells were the first poems written by time, small verses of existence that would one day fill entire volumes of life. Evolution began not as a deliberate act, but as a rhythm, a pattern woven into the fabric of life itself. Every living cell contained the instructions for its own continuation, and with each new generation came small variations. Most changes passed unnoticed, but a few, by chance, allowed some to endure more easily than others. Over vast stretches of time, these tiny differences accumulated, shaping new forms and new abilities. Life was no longer repeating itself exactly. It was improvising, finding new ways to exist. The result was not chaos, but beauty, the slow unfolding of an endless biological poem. In the deep oceans, bacteria and archaea thrived, feeding on minerals from the seafloor or on sunlight filtering faintly through the upper layers. Some formed chains and filaments, connecting into colonies. Others developed membranes and structures to move through water, drifting and swimming in search of nutrients. With each adaptation, life became more intricate. The very chemistry of survival was teaching the language of change. The planet, once silent, now pulsed with this quiet creativity. Time's poetry was not hurried. Millions of years could pass before a single meaningful change endured. But life, patient as the author that shaped it, continued its slow expansion. Cells learned to live together, forming cooperative structures where each contributed something different. Some specialized in protection, others in energy, others in reproduction. From these unions, complexity arose, organisms within organisms, bound by mutual dependence. It was the first example of harmony written into nature, a verse of coexistence that would echo throughout every age. Through such unions, eukaryotic cells were born, those with nuclei and organelles, each compartment performing a task with precision. Inside them, the legacy of ancient bacteria lived on. The mitochondria that powered their energy were once free-living creatures themselves. This merging of life into life was one of evolution's most profound moments, a reminder that cooperation can be as creative a force as competition. The Earth was experimenting with collaboration, building complexity from unity, as if time itself had discovered the art of composition. From these complex cells came multicellular life. At first it was only clusters, simple arrangements that grew and divided together. But slowly, these clusters learned to communicate, to differentiate, to assign roles. Some cells became skin, others muscle, others bone. Each specialized function added a line to the growing poem of existence. The living world was learning structure, and with it, new forms of grace. In the oceans, shapes began to bloom, soft bodies gliding through the water, absorbing nutrients from their surroundings. These early multicellular creatures were fragile, easily broken, yet they endured because time allowed them to adapt. The first nervous systems began to appear, faint signals pulsing through bodies to coordinate motion. Sensation emerged, the ability to respond not only to the environment but to anticipate it. In that moment, life became aware of rhythm, not in thought but in movement. The poetry of evolution had found its meter. For hundreds of millions of years, the seas remained the canvas on which time wrote its verses. Coral-like organisms formed reefs. Jelly-like creatures drifted through the currents. Strange and delicate forms flourished in the deep, some shaped like ribbons, others like leaves or spirals. Fossils of these ancient beings, now preserved in stone, reveal their ethereal beauty, the symmetry of their forms, the elegance of their design. There was no rush, no competition as we think of it now, only the patient. The elaboration of life's possibilities, the gradual perfection of its patterns, but poetry often thrives on tension, and so it was with evolution. Not every experiment succeeded. Extinctions came like pauses between stanzas, sweeping away what could not endure and clearing space for what could. The earth itself shifted and changed, the continents moving, climates cooling and warming in endless cycles. Each upheaval tested life's resilience, and those that survived became stronger, more adaptable. Through difficulty, life found new expressions. its verse deepened by struggle, its rhythm enriched by renewal. In the Cambrian seas, roughly 500 million years ago, this poetic energy erupted in an astonishing burst of creativity. Evolution's quiet song became a symphony. Suddenly, the world teemed with new forms, creatures with shells and spines, with eyes and limbs, with jaws and fins. The blueprint of animal life as we know it was written in that brief, magnificent era. Trilobites crawled across the seafloor, armored and alert. Worm-like creatures tunneled through sediments. The ancestors of fish learned to swim with purpose. The oceans, once the home of only drifting simplicity, had become dynamic with movement and intent. The evolution of sight marked another turning point. For the first time, the world could be seen. Eyes, in their primitive forms, captured light and shadow, motion and stillness. The environment, which had always been there, now had witnesses. The poetry of evolution expanded from the sensory to the perceptual, from touch to vision, from reaction to experience. Each new sense added complexity. Each adaptation refined the balance between life and its surroundings. The story was not only continuing, it was learning to describe itself more vividly. Above the waters, the continents remained barren, their surfaces sculpted by wind and rain. Yet soon, even the land would not remain untouched. Tiny mats of algae and lichen began to creep onto damp rocks near the shore, holding fast to the mineral earth. In time, plants would follow, and with them, the air would grow richer in oxygen. The poetry that began in water was preparing to find a new voice on land. Throughout all of this, the forces guiding evolution were simple: variation, inheritance, and time. But from these simple tools came endless diversity. There was no plan, no pre-written script, only the quiet exploration of what could be. Each life form was a word, each ecosystem a stanza, each extinction a pause before the next idea took shape. The universe was not merely producing life, it was composing meaning, line by line, through the delicate interaction of chance and necessity. Even now, when we look back across these ages, we can trace the rhythm of that ancient poem. We see it in the spiral of a seashell, in the branching veins of a leaf, in the beating of a heart. Evolution's language is written everywhere, subtle, intricate, and endlessly repeating. Every living being is a verse, every generation a continuation of the same eternal song. And though the poem of life began without consciousness, in time it would produce beings capable of reading it, beings who could look back and recognize themselves as part of its flow. They would name its patterns, study its rhymes, and marvel at its depth. Yet even in their understanding, they would remain bound to it, for they too were lines written in the same ink, the same stardust and memory that first whispered in the sea. As the planet turned and ages passed, evolution continued its slow composition, unhurried and unending. Each heartbeat, each breath, each movement of a creature in the wild was another note in its song. The world had become a living poem, one written by time, recited by the oceans, and carried forward by every being that ever was or ever will be. Its verses echoed softly across the universe, where perhaps, somewhere far away, other worlds were learning to write their own. 8. The age of oceans and ancient breath. The seas had become the heart of the world, a living expanse where time continued to write its most beautiful and intricate verses. Beneath their shimmering surface, life pulsed in quiet harmony. The early Earth was still young by the measure of the cosmos, yet it had already seen billions of years unfold, each one layering new meaning upon the last. The oceans were its great memory, holding the first words of existence in their depths, nurturing them through the slow rhythm of evolution. The age of oceans was an age of transformation. Life had taken root in salt water, learning to breathe in ways the land could not yet imagine. Across the planet, continents drifted slowly beneath the clouds, their shapes unfamiliar, their surfaces bare and silent. The air was dense, heavy with carbon and vapor, and though the sun shone as it does today, its light reached the surface through a veil of haze. Yet in the oceans, that same light performed miracles. Tiny cells floating near the surface learned to capture it, to turn sunlight into energy, and in doing so, they altered the chemistry of the entire world. These organisms, cyanobacteria and their ancient kin, were the first to breathe in a new way. Through photosynthesis, They transformed carbon dioxide and water into sugars and oxygen, using sunlight as their source of power. It was a process both simple and profound. With every pulse of light absorbed, oxygen was released into the sea, molecule by molecule, invisibly changing the course of Earth's story. What began as a byproduct of survival would become the foundation for everything that followed the breath of all future life. At first, this oxygen did not reach the sky. It was swallowed by the oceans, reacting with iron dissolved in the water to form rust-colored sediments that sank to the seafloor. Layer upon layer of iron oxide accumulated over time, painting the ocean beds in bands of red and black. These ancient deposits still remain in the rocks we find today, silent witnesses to the birth of breathable air. Only after countless ages did the balance shift. The oceans, saturated and full, began to release oxygen into the atmosphere. The planet's air, once a suffocating haze, slowly began to clear. The Great Oxidation Event, as it would later be called, was both a dawn and a reckoning. For the earliest forms of life, accustomed to a world without oxygen, this new element was poison. Many species vanished, undone by the very breath that would sustain their descendants. But others endured, adapting to the change, learning to use oxygen as a powerful tool. This innovation gave them energy beyond anything before. With it came motion, complexity, and resilience. In this way, life renewed itself once more, as it always had through transformation. As the oceans filled with oxygen, new ecosystems emerged. Algae, simple and abundant, covered vast stretches of the sea, forming floating layers that captured sunlight and released air. Beneath them, bacteria thrived in the shadows, feeding on the remains of others, recycling nutrients through endless cycles of death and renewal. The ocean had become an immense, self-sustaining system, each wave carrying both creation and decay. Time had learned to balance its prose, to weave together life and death into a single unbroken narrative. Over millions of years, the oxygen in the atmosphere reached a point where a new phenomenon became possible: the formation of ozone. This invisible layer, high above the surface, filtered the sun's harsh radiation, allowing more delicate forms of life to flourish near the surface. It was a shield, born from life itself, protecting its own continuation. The oceans now shimmered with the promise of expansion. With light softened and conditions stable, evolution began to accelerate. Cells joined together, forming larger bodies, coordinating movement and growth. The first multicellular creatures appeared, their shapes fragile yet determined, their forms drifting through the currents like verses carried on the tide. In this ancient age, the oceans were not yet blue in the way we know them now. Their colour was darker, their depths clouded with sediment and life. The waters near the surface glowed green with chlorophyll, the pigment of photosynthesis. It was a world bathed in shifting light, where the boundaries between colour and darkness blurred. From the seafloor rose forests of microbial mats, dense layers of living cells bound together by their own secret architecture. These mats released tiny bubbles of oxygen that drifted upward, merging into the air above. Slowly the world began to breathe. The continents, meanwhile, continued to move in their silent, slow dance. As they collided and broke apart, mountains rose and seas deepened. Volcanoes exhaled carbon into the air, while rivers carried nutrients from the land into the sea. This constant exchange between stone and water kept the balance of the planet in motion. The Earth was not a passive stage for life, it was a participant, shaping and being shaped by its creations. Each eruption, each rainfall, each shift of the crust became part of the same long and living rhythm. If one could have floated upon those ancient waters, the scene would have been both alien and familiar. The surface would ripple with endless patterns of light, while beneath, countless invisible lives moved in harmony. There were no fish yet, no coral reefs or kelp forests. But already, ecosystems were forming communities of microorganisms living in mutual dependence. Each relied on the waste of another, each gave back what another required. It was a perfect exchange, the first expression of the balance that would define life on Earth forever. The oxygen these oceans released began to change the colour of the planet itself. Rust-red sediments gave way to green and blue. The air thinned, becoming clear enough for sunlight to scatter through it. The sky turned pale, then deeper, until the first true blue sky reflected upon the sea. It was in that moment, perhaps, that Earth became recognizable, a world of light, water, and air in balance. The oceans and the atmosphere had entered into a dialogue, each shaping the other in an eternal conversation of breath and reflection. Within the deep, evolution continued its slow poetry. Single-celled organisms experimented with new shapes and behaviors. Some extended tiny filaments to move, others learned to sense their surroundings through chemical gradients. In time, some became predators, consuming other cells to gain energy. The first food chains emerged, delicate but enduring. Life had begun to compete and cooperate in equal measure, creating an unseen web that connected every living thing in the water. From that web, complexity grew. There was still no awareness, no thought, no eyes to see or voices to sing, yet the entire planet was in motion, breathing in harmony with the life it carried. The atmosphere thickened with oxygen, the oceans shimmered with green, and the continents whispered under rain. The earth, once silent, now hummed with quiet energy. Every cell that divided, every molecule that formed, every atom that found its place contributed to this vast symphony of being. The age of oceans was an age of patience. It spanned billions of years, each moment as gentle and necessary as the beat of a heart. Without it, nothing that followed could have been. The air we breathe today was forged in those waters, the balance of gases refined by the work of unseen lives. Even now, when the wind moves across the modern sea, it carries the faint echo of that first ancient breath. We are the descendants of those oceans, their chemistry flows through our blood, their rhythm beats within our hearts. Every breath we take is a continuation of their song. The air enters us, nourishes us, and leaves again, returning to the same cycle that began long before the first creature ever walked upon the land. Time wrote its most enduring stanza in those early seas, a verse made not of words but of breath, and though billions of years have passed, that verse has never ended. It continues still, in the movement of the waves, in the pulse of tides, in the quiet inhalation of all living things. The oceans spoke first, and their voice became the breath of the world. 9. The emergence of land, a new chapter begins. The oceans had written the longest chapter of Earth's early story, but in time, the pen of creation began to shift its focus. Beneath the moving water, continents stirred and rose, pushed upward by the slow, unseen power of the planet's mantle. The world was restless, reshaping itself as if preparing for something entirely new. What had been a realm of endless sea now began to reveal fragments of land, first as volcanic islands, then as larger masses, their dark surfaces glistening with rain. The oceans, which had cradled the first breath of life, now stood ready to share that gift with the land. When the continents first rose, they were barren, sculpted by wind and storm. Their rocks were raw and sharp, their surfaces silent except for the hiss of rain and the crack of thunder. Rivers began to form, carving through the stone, carrying minerals and sediments back to the sea. The atmosphere, rich with oxygen thanks to the labour of ancient microbes, began to take on its modern character. The air cleared, sunlight streamed more freely to the surface, and the colours of the world began to shift. Blue skies reflected on wide oceans, and the land, though lifeless still, waited for its first touch of green. For millions of years this transformation continued in silence. The continents drifted and collided, breaking apart and rejoining in a slow cosmic dance. Mountains rose where plates met, and erosion carried their dust across the plains. These processes shaped valleys, basins, and coasts, new landscapes that would one day be filled with forests, rivers, and life. The earth was sketching outlines of future beauty, the contours of places where evolution would soon write its next verses. The first living pioneers of land did not arrive from the air or from seeds. They came quietly, creeping from the sea. Simple algae and cyanobacteria began to spread along the shorelines, clinging to damp rocks and tidal pools. They were small, fragile forms, but they possessed something extraordinary, the ability to endure both water and air. In these thin layers of life, the Earth's surface began to change. They absorbed sunlight, released oxygen, and trapped dust, gradually forming a thin crust of organic matter upon the stone. The colour of life began to appear, faint and hesitant, but certain. Over time, these microbial mats evolved into more complex organisms, early plants that could retain moisture, anchor themselves in soil, and withstand the harsh winds. Their roots, primitive at first, began to break down rock, creating the first true soils. In this way, the land and life entered into a partnership. The rocks provided minerals, and life, in return, softened and reshaped the stone, preparing the ground for future generations. The land was no longer empty. It had begun to breathe. As the first greens spread across the continents, the climate began to respond. Plants drew carbon dioxide from the air, releasing more oxygen in return. The balance of gases shifted once again, and the planet's temperature found a new equilibrium. The once harsh sunlight was now filtered through a softer, bluer sky, and rain began to fall more regularly. The land, which had once baked under the unrelenting glare of the sun, grew mild and fertile. The surface of the earth was being transformed into a place that could support abundance. The earliest land plants were small mosses, liverworts and ferns. They formed mats along rivers and lakes, covering the damp soil in emerald texture. With them came fungi, working invisibly to break down minerals and recycle nutrients. Together, they created ecosystems where none had existed before. This quiet collaboration between plants and fungi was the beginning of the terrestrial biosphere, the living skin of Earth. Step by step, the green world advanced inland, its roots delving deeper, its leaves reaching higher. In the shallow pools and estuaries where land met sea, animals began their first tentative explorations beyond water. Many of these were arthropods, creatures with jointed limbs and hard exoskeletons that protected them from drying out. Millipedes, scorpions, and ancient insects crawled along the shores, feeding on decaying plants and organic matter. Their movements were slow and cautious, but they marked a turning point in evolution. For the first time, life had mastered both sea and land, uniting two worlds that had once been separate. The air itself was changing, becoming something living beings could truly inhabit. With the increase of oxygen, respiration became more efficient. Larger bodies could form, faster movements became possible, and the boundaries of existence expanded once more. The earth, which had once been silent rock, now carried the faint sounds of movement, the whisper of leaves, the rustle of creatures crawling across the soil, the soft hum of insects exploring the air. Meanwhile, the continents continued their slow drift across the planet's surface. Vast supercontinents formed and broke apart, reshaping the world's geography again and again. Each collision created new mountains, each separation gave rise to new oceans. These constant shifts changed the climate, the tides, and the pathways of migration. Evolution adapted to each new landscape, shaping life in endless variation. The land became a canvas of change, and time was the artist, endlessly revising and refining its work. As plants grew taller and more complex, forests began to form. Ferns and early trees stretched toward the sky, creating shaded groves. Where humidity lingered and soil deepened, the presence of plants altered the air, enriching it with oxygen and moisture. The once barren continents now shimmered with green life. Rain cycles stabilized, weather patterns softened, and the first ecosystems of land came fully alive. The transformation was complete. The Earth had become a planet of color, texture, and breath. It is almost impossible to imagine how long this process took. From the first microbial mats to the vast forests that would one day cover continents, billions of years passed. Yet through it all, time never hurried. Each change built upon the last, every adaptation a gentle step forward. The emergence of land was not an event, but an unfolding, a slow awakening of the world from its long oceanic dream. The seas had written the opening chapters, but now the continents began to speak, their voices carried in wind and leaf. In the growing forests, new creatures appeared to join the chorus. Amphibians, evolved from fish that had learned to breathe air, took their first uncertain steps onto land. Their limbs, once used to paddle through water, now supported them on mud and stone. They laid their eggs in shallow ponds, their lives balanced between two worlds. In their movements, we can still glimpse the memory of the oceans they left behind. Every living thing on land carried that memory, for all were descended from the same watery origins. The relationship between land and sea never ended. Rain returned water to the soil, rivers carried it back to the ocean, and tides continued to shape the coastlines. The cycle of evaporation, condensation, and rainfall tied all parts of the planet together in one continuous breath. The Earth was no longer divided between water and rock. It had become a single living organism, united through its movement and its memory. If one could stand on the shore of that ancient world, the view would have been serene and unfamiliar. The air would have been rich and warm, the forests dense with strange plants. The sounds of insects and the gentle lapping of waves would have mingled with the sigh of wind through giant ferns. Above, the moon would rise, pulling the tides and lighting the land with silver glow. It would have been a world both alien and profoundly alive. The emergence of land marked a new beginning, not just for Earth's creatures, but for time's great story itself. The oceans had given life its first breath, and the continents gave it a new direction. From this point forward, life would grow in countless forms, creatures that walked, flew, and thought, each carrying within them the trace of the sea. The land was the next verse in the poem of existence, written in the language of roots, rain, and wind. And as the earth turned beneath the light of its steady sun, that new chapter began quietly, inevitably, and beautifully. 10. The Great Rewrites, Extinction and Renewal. The story of life, though filled with wonder, has never been a tale told in peace alone. Time, as the patient author of Earth's long narrative, writes not only of creation but also of erasure. Each new chapter is built upon the fading of another. In this way, extinction and renewal became the rhythm of the planet's song, as natural and necessary as breathing itself. For every form that vanished, another arose, shaped by the same forces that had always guided life change, adaptation, and endurance. As life spread across land and sea, the Earth continued to shift beneath it. Continents drifted slowly across the planet's surface, colliding and parting in cycles that spanned hundreds of millions of years. These movements changed the oceans and the climate, altering habitats and isolating species. Volcanoes poured gases into the air, darkening skies, while mountain ranges rose where oceans once lay. Every alteration in the Earth's shape and temperature set off new waves of transformation. Time did not simply allow life to evolve, it compelled it to adapt or fade away. The first great extinction came quietly, long before the rise of complex animals. It was born not of fire or ice, but of chemistry, the slow poisoning of the oceans as oxygen accumulated. For early organisms that had flourished in oxygen-free waters, the new atmosphere was deadly. Their world changed faster than they could adapt, and they vanished. Yet in that same transformation, other forms of life found opportunity. The oxygen that had destroyed became the foundation for energy-rich metabolism, fueling new creatures with greater complexity and strength. The loss was immense, but the renewal that followed was greater still. In time, as the seas grew calm again, life diversified with astonishing creativity. The Cambrian explosion filled the oceans with motion and light, with beings that crawled, swam, and hunted. Trilobites scuttled across the seafloor, jellyfish drifted like translucent lanterns, and armored creatures grazed upon the algae. For millions of years the world flourished in balance. But balance, on a planet always in motion, can never last forever. Gradually, environmental shifts, changes in temperature, and the depletion of oxygen in certain seas brought another wave of decline. Species that had filled the waters vanished, leaving only their imprints in stone as testimony. Extinction is often imagined as destruction, yet in the story of Earth, it is also revision, the careful rewriting of the text of life. When a species disappears, the spaces it once occupied are left open for something new. The ecosystems that collapse in one age lay the foundation for those of the next. After every loss, time begins to write again, reshaping the world with the quiet precision of natural law. The Earth does not mourn, it transforms. The Devonian period brought another grand flourishing, this time across the continents. Forests spread across the land, filling the air with oxygen and creating habitats for countless creatures. Fish grew in number and diversity, some developing lungs and limbs that allowed them to explore the shores. Amphibians followed, crawling from the sea into the damp forests. Insects filled the skies, their wings beating softly over ferns and mosses. It was an age of expansion, when life seemed limitless. But again, the world changed. Shifts in sea level and climate disrupted the delicate networks of existence. Oceans receded, and habitats vanished. Another extinction followed, quiet, vast, and absolute in its reach. The pattern continued. Each era rose and fell like a breath. The Carboniferous forests gave way to new deserts, the swamps dried, and the lush world of towering ferns transformed into something leaner and harsher. From these changes came the reptiles, creatures better suited to dryness and heat. They would dominate the land for millions of years, their scales gleaming beneath ancient suns. And yet, even they would not escape the rewriting hand of time. The Permian extinction, one of the greatest of all, arrived like a whisper that became a roar. Volcanic eruptions tore through the crust of the earth, filling the air with ash and poison. The skies darkened, the oceans acidified, and temperatures soared. Nearly all life perished, 9 of every 10 species gone. The forests burned, the seas emptied, and the land fell silent. It was as though the planet had paused its own heartbeat. The story of life momentarily halted. But even then, the embers of renewal glowed beneath the ashes. Tiny survivors endured in hidden places, clinging to existence while time prepared to write anew. When life returned, it did so with unexpected vigor. The reptiles that survived began to evolve into new forms, larger and more diverse than before. Among them arose the dinosaurs, magnificent and enduring, who would rule the Earth for over 150 million years. They filled every corner of the planet, the seas, the skies, and the land. Around them, flowering plants appeared, painting the continents in colour. Insects evolved alongside them, pollinating and spreading seeds. It was a time of balance and beauty, the Earth once again vibrant and full. But time, ever the faithful author, never stops turning its pages. When the age of the dinosaurs reached its height, the universe intervened with quiet finality. From the depths of space came a visitor, a fragment of rock travelling faster than thought. Its impact shook the Earth with the force of creation itself. Firestorms spread across continents, skies filled with dust, and the warmth of the sun was blotted out. Within a few short years, the giants were gone, along with most of the species that had thrived beside them. Yet even in the shadow of catastrophe, new beginnings stirred. Small mammals, once hidden in burrows and shadows, began to emerge. They filled the empty spaces left behind, exploring niches unclaimed by the fallen. The forests regrew, the air cleared, and the warmth returned. From these survivors came intelligence, adaptability, and the seeds of future civilizations. The loss of one world gave rise to another. Each extinction, though it ended an era, opened a doorway to what was yet to come. Across all these cycles, one truth remained constant. Life endures. It bends but does not break, retreats but never disappears entirely. The same forces that destroy also renew, and the same time that ends one story begins another. Every living being carries within it the memory of survival, the unbroken line that stretches back through each extinction to the first whisper of life in the sea. The fossils of ancient creatures are not relics of failure. They are the punctuation marks of existence, reminders that even endings can be beautiful. If one could watch from beyond time, the history of life would appear not as a tragedy, but as a masterpiece of transformation. Each rise and fall, each creation and collapse, adds to the richness of the whole. The Earth's story is not a straight line, but a spiral, always returning, always renewing, always reaching forward into new forms of being. Even now, in the present age, that rhythm continues. Though the names of species have changed and the landscapes have shifted, extinction and renewal still dance together, unseen yet eternal. The forests breathe, the oceans turn, and the winds carry seeds across continents. The world remembers every version of itself, holding the lessons of its past within its soil and stone. And so, the great rewrites continue. Time, tireless and tender, keeps shaping the narrative, erasing and recreating with the same hand. What vanishes in one era becomes the foundation for the next. What ends today prepares for tomorrow. Life's resilience is not defiance but harmony, an understanding between destruction and creation, a balance that sustains all that is. The story of Earth, written through extinction and renewal, is not a story of loss. It is a story of becoming, of endless transformation, under the steady guidance of time. Each ending, however vast or silent, is followed by a new beginning waiting just beneath the surface. And through it all, the planet breathes, turning its pages one by one, its narrative unbroken, its author patient and eternal. 11. The Age of Giants and Forests. After the storms of extinction quieted, the world entered an age of deep stillness and green renewal. The earth, once scorched and emptied by fire and change, began to breathe again. Seeds hidden in ash and soil awoke, sending small shoots upward toward the light. The air grew warm and heavy, thick with moisture and the scent of life returning. The planet, having endured another rewriting of its story, began to compose its next great chapter, a chapter of towering trees, immense creatures, and a harmony that would echo through ages. The forests came first, spreading like soft carpets across the continents. Great ferns unfurled along riverbanks, mosses clung to stones, and trees began their long ascent toward the sky. In these new ecosystems, the earth found its rhythm again. Roots wound deep into the soil, binding the land together, while leaves opened to capture sunlight and exhale oxygen. The balance between air, water, and earth deepened into something almost musical, a slow breathing song of growth. The world was once again alive in every direction. These were forests unlike those we know now. Many of the trees had no flowers, no fruit, no leaves as we imagine them today. They were vast trunked pillars, with fronds like feathers and bark that rose smooth and thick toward the sunday. Beneath their canopy, a dim green light filtered through, bathing the ground in shadow and mist. Rivers wound through the undergrowth, and the air shimmered with heat and humidity. This was the Carboniferous world, an age where the planet's lungs were newly formed and working with deep, steady rhythm. In these forests, life flourished as never before. The insects of this era were enormous compared to those of our time. Dragonflies with wingspans wider than a hawk's, millipedes longer than a man, and spiders the size of small birds. They filled the air with a low hum, their bodies thriving on the rich oxygen that blanketed the world. Amphibians, too, grew large and diverse, their slick bodies adapted to both water and land. They hunted among the ferns, their songs echoing through the wet air, blending with the endless drone of insects and the rustling of leaves. Everywhere there was motion. Streams flowed with quiet power, carrying minerals from the mountains to the sea. The rain fell in rhythmic patterns, nourishing the forests and feeding the rivers that gave rise to swamps and deltas. Time moved gently, and with it, evolution unfolded in its slow, deliberate way. Fish with strong fins learned to crawl onto the banks, testing their weight upon the land. Reptiles appeared, creatures with tougher skins and stronger lungs, able to move farther from water and withstand the heat of the day. Each step forward was a new stanza in the planet's living poem. As plants spread and multiplied, they changed the world around them. The carbon dioxide they absorbed from the air cooled the climate, creating a temperate balance that allowed even more growth. Layers of fallen vegetation accumulated in the swamps, pressing into the ground, where heat and pressure slowly transformed them into coal. Beneath the forests, deep in the earth, the memory of this green age was being written into stone. Millions of years later, these ancient layers would tell the story of a time when Earth's pulse beat slow and strong beneath endless trees. Among these forests roamed creatures of increasing size and grace. Early reptiles adapted to the drier climates inland, while amphibians continued to thrive in the wetlands. The diversity of life seemed boundless. Evolution experimented freely, shaping limbs, scales, and lungs into countless variations. Each adaptation was a quiet triumph, each new species a word added to time's unending sentence. The balance of this world was perfect but delicate. The oxygen-rich atmosphere that sustained such large life also made the planet prone to fire. Lightning would ignite the forests, and vast regions would burn, filling the air with smoke and ash. Yet even this destruction had purpose. The fires cleared space for new growth, releasing nutrients back into the soil. The forests regrew quickly, lush and vibrant once more. The cycle of life, death, and renewal continued, as it always had, guided by time's patient hand. It was during this age that the first true giants of the animal world began to emerge. Reptiles, freed from dependence on water, spread across the continents, growing larger and more adaptable. Some developed thick scales and powerful jaws, others moved with quiet grace through the underbrush. Their eggs, protected by shells, could survive the dry air, allowing them to reproduce far from the safety of rivers and lakes. With this innovation, life fully conquered the land. Over the ages, these reptiles diversified into forms that would one day give rise to the great dinosaurs. The forests grew even taller, their roots intertwining with ancient ferns and fungi in mutual dependence. Each part of the ecosystem supported the other, trees producing oxygen and food, fungi recycling decay into nourishment, animals spreading seeds and shaping the landscape with their movement. The earth had found an equilibrium, a quiet, continuous cycle of growth and renewal. If one could stand in the middle of these ancient forests, the air would feel almost heavy, thick with moisture and scent. Every breath would carry traces of moss and soil, every sound softened by the canopy above. The light would be green and dim, broken only by shafts of sunlight that pierced through the leaves, illuminating clouds of insects that shimmered like dust in a dream. The forest floor would be soft beneath foot, layered with centuries of fallen fronds. It was a world enclosed in itself, timeless and serene. And yet, beyond the horizon, the earth was changing still. As continents continued to shift and merge, new mountain ranges formed, and climates began to cool. The age of warmth and humidity slowly gave way to a period of dryness. Vast inland seas shrank, and the great swamps retreated. Some forests withered, their remnants buried beneath layers of sediment. The lush expanses that had once covered half the planet became smaller, giving way to deserts and plains. But as always, change was not an end. It was an invitation to begin again. The decline of the Carboniferous forests paved the way for something new. Reptiles adapted once more, evolving into forms that could survive in arid lands. The first conifers appeared trees with needles and cones that could endure cold and drought. The world was preparing for the next transformation, the next rewriting of its living text. Life had grown wiser, more flexible, and with each change, more resilient. Still, the memory of that age of green giants lingered. The coal beneath our feet, the oxygen in our lungs, even the soil that sustains the forests of today, all are gifts from that ancient time. The world as we know it is built upon the quiet labour of those primordial trees, those immense insects, and the endless cycles of renewal that shaped them. Their legacy is written not in words, but in the very breath of the planet. The age of giants and forests was an age of abundance, an era when the earth learned the art of balance. It was here that the great themes of life, growth, adaptation, and renewal found their clearest expression. Even as it faded, its influence remained, echoing through every future age. Time, the eternal author, had shown that beauty could rise from silence, and strength could grow from fragility. And so, as the ancient forests sighed beneath the weight of their own history, the world turned once more toward transformation. The giants would change, the trees would fall, but life would continue, finding new forms, new rhythms, new ways to endure. The pages of Earth's story turned softly, one after another, the ink of time flowing steady and eternal, as the forest's breath mingled with the sky, and the song of life moved onward without end. 12. The whisper of continents. The earth is never still. Beneath the forests, beneath the oceans, beneath even the quiet layers of stone, there is motion. Slow, ancient and steady, it moves with the rhythm of time itself. The continents drift, collide and separate like thoughts shifting in the mind of the planet. They whisper to one another through the deep crust, reshaping the face of the world in cycles so long that no creature living could ever notice. Yet over the ages, this whisper has written some of the most profound chapters in Earth's history. When the age of forests and giant creatures began to wane, the continents were already moving toward one another. Across millions of years, the great landmasses crept together until they formed a single supercontinent, Pangaea. It was vast beyond imagination, stretching from pole to pole, surrounded by an endless ocean that mirrored the sky. The air above it shimmered with heat, and deserts sprawled across its centre where rain seldom fell. Along its edges, forests clung to the moist winds from the sea, and rivers wound through the plains, carrying the lifeblood of the land toward the deep. The formation of Pangaea was both creation and destruction. As continents collided, mountains rose colossal ranges that cut through the clouds, their summits veiled in mist. Valleys folded beneath their weight, and earthquakes rippled across the surface as the planet adjusted to its new shape. Volcanic eruptions painted the horizon with fire, releasing gases that drifted into the atmosphere, changing the balance of air and climate. The world was being rewritten once again, not by life this time, but by the restless movement of the Earth itself. The creatures of this age adapted to the shifting world around them. Reptiles, already dominant since the great forest decline, diversified into forms suited for every climate. Some developed thick scales to conserve water under the burning sun. Others grew sleek and swift to move through dense vegetation. In the oceans, fish with hard shells and sharp teeth filled the depths, while on land, small mammals began their quiet rise in the shadows of the reptilian giants. Time, in its quiet patience, was preparing the world for change once again. The continents whispered softly to one another in their movements, but their voices carried power. When plates collided, mountain chains grew like wrinkles in the skin of the earth. When they drifted apart, great rifts opened, and the sea poured in, forming new coastlines. The continents, it seemed, were breathing, expanding and contracting through the endless rhythm of geologic time. This breathing shaped climates, ocean currents, and the very evolution of life itself. Over millions of years, Pangaea began to break apart. The whispers turned into sighs, and cracks spread through its surface like lines upon aging parchment. The supercontinent, once whole, began to split into two great masses, Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south. Between them, new oceans formed, young and restless. The Earth's face was changing once again, and with it, the destiny of every creature that lived upon it. The separation of continents brought diversity. Isolated ecosystems evolved along different paths, and what was once one world became many. In the north, vast deserts gave way to lush lowlands where new species of reptiles and early dinosaurs thrived. In the south, enormous forests of conifers and cycads covered the land, their shadows home to creatures adapted to dim light and heavy air. The planet was becoming a tapestry of contrasts, heat and ice, dryness and abundance, solitude and connection. As these changes unfolded, the climate shifted again. Volcanic activity released carbon into the air, warming the planet, while ocean currents carried moisture from one continent to another. Rain returned to some regions, feeding rivers that carved new valleys through the rock. The Earth was a sculptor, reshaping its own surface with every passing millennium. Wind and water were its tools, erosion its gentle touch. Mountains wore down into plains, and the sediments they left behind became the foundations for future worlds. Through all of this, the Earth's surface remained alive with motion. Beneath the crust, molten rock flowed like blood through veins of stone, pushing and pulling the continents in ceaseless migration. The very ground beneath every living thing was not fixed but floating, drifting upon layers of molten memory. This slow dance of tectonic plates became one of time's most profound instruments, the engine of creation and destruction, the force that unites and divides all that rests upon it. From these movements, the modern continents began to take shape. What would one day become Africa and South America drifted apart, leaving behind the vast Atlantic Ocean. North America turned slowly westward, while Eurasia spread wide, stretching its mountain ranges across the horizon. To the south, Antarctica and Australia separated, carrying their unique ecosystems with them. Each continent became its own experiment, a verse in time's great poem, evolving independently but still connected by the winds, the seas, and the unseen currents beneath the crust. The life that filled these continents reflected their individuality. In the warm, fertile lands, dinosaurs grew to astonishing size, filling the role of both predator and grazer. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4, their forms adapted to every niche. They ruled for over 150 million years, living through countless cycles of growth and renewal. Their presence was so enduring that they became woven into the identity of the Earth itself, a symbol of its power and resilience. Yet even their reign would eventually give way, as all things do, to another rewriting of time's design. The whisper of continents continued throughout their age. Even as the dinosaurs roamed, the plates beneath them never ceased to move. Oceans widened and closed, islands rose and sank. The face of the world was always in flux, though to the creatures that lived upon it these shifts were invisible. Only time could hear the deep murmurs of stone beneath the soil, the conversations between mountains and seas. It was a language spoken slowly, patiently, over eons, one that told of impermanence and transformation. If one could listen closely, even now, that whisper can still be heard. It is the rumble of distant earthquakes, the sigh of shifting ridges beneath the ocean floor, the slow grinding of continents as they continue their endless journey. The earth has never stopped speaking. It tells the same story again and again of unity and division, of destruction and renewal, of change as the only constant. The continents carry memory within their rocks. In their layers of stone are written the histories of ancient seas, lost forests, and vanished species. Every fossil, every ripple of sediment, is a word in the planet's ongoing chronicle. Together, they form an epic that has no end, a story of worlds rising and falling, of oceans giving way to deserts and deserts to fields of green. The continents, though silent to us, are living archives of time. As the planet turns beneath the stars, their slow motion continues. It will take millions more years for them to meet again, to merge into another supercontinent as they have done many times before. When that day comes, the shape of the world will be new once more, and life will adapt to it as it always has. The whisper of continents will continue, as soft and constant as a heartbeat, carrying forward the story of Earth's unending transformation. Time, as always, listens to the Earth's quiet dialogue. It lets the continents move and rest, lets the seas rise and fall, lets the mountains crumble and be reborn. In this patient exchange between stone and motion, the planet finds its rhythm, an eternal, wordless song that has guided life for more than 4 billion years. And somewhere, deep beneath our feet, the next chapter is already being written, line by line, in the slow, unhurried voice of the earth itself. 13. The deep memory of stone, beneath every forest, beneath every ocean, and beneath every city that stands upon the land, there is a silence far older than life itself. The stones that make up the crust of the earth are not lifeless things. They are the planet's memory. Each layer of rock holds a record of what has come before, the warmth of ancient suns, the breath of vanished creatures, the imprint of oceans that have long receded. The earth remembers through its minerals, its layers, its slow and patient transformation. In the deep memory of stone, time finds a permanence that no living thing can claim. Each grain of sand that drifts in a desert once belonged to something larger. It might have been part of a mountain, torn down by rain and wind. It might have been the shell of a sea creature, compressed and buried until pressure turned it into limestone. It might have been ash from a volcano that burned millions of years ago, now softened into sediment. Every particle carries its own quiet story, one of pressure, erosion, or renewal, and when these grains gather and harden again, they become another layer in the planet's vast geological library. If one could see deep beneath the surface, the Earth would appear like a book open to endless pages. The oldest layers, dark and heavy, hold the memory of fire molten rock that once flowed freely, cooling into the foundations of continents. Above them lie layers shaped by water, sandstone from ancient beaches, shale from vanished lakes, limestone from coral reefs that thrived before any human imagination. Each stratum is a moment frozen in time, its textures and colours formed by the conditions of its birth. Together, they tell the story of oceans rising and falling, mountains forming and fading, climates shifting from ice to warmth and back again. The stones remember things we have never seen. They remember the time before trees, before air turned blue, before life had even found a foothold. They remember when continents were still molten and stars reflected upon endless seas of fire. In their crystalline structures, atoms have aligned in patterns that have survived billions of years without breaking. These structures are not random, they are the physical language of time itself, written in symmetry and pressure. Sometimes, when stone breaks open, it reveals what it has carried within for ages. A fossilized leaf, the spiral of a shell, the impression of a raindrop that fell before humankind existed. In such moments, the past is not gone, it is merely waiting to be seen. Fossils are not simply remnants of life, they are memories that stone has agreed to hold. Every ridge and curve, every subtle line, is a word in the Earth's long story, preserved through patience alone. Mountains, too, are forms of memory. They rise slowly, built from the collision of continents, from pressure that bends and folds the crust upward toward the sky. Within their peaks, rocks from the deepest layers of the earth are lifted into the light. When we look at a mountain, we are seeing a structure that has lived through fire, compression, and erosion, a monument to time's persistence. Each ridge, each vein of quartz, each streak of color in the stone speaks of something that happened long ago. An ocean that closed, a volcano that erupted, a river that carved its path through solid rock. The slow weathering of mountains is not destruction but renewal. As stone breaks and crumbles, it returns to the cycle that built it. The particles it sheds are carried away by wind and water, forming new layers elsewhere. In this way, even the most enduring peaks participate in the endless rewriting of the Earth. The planet remembers not by preserving everything as it was, but by transforming it into something new while keeping its essence intact. The deep memory of stone is, therefore, not static, it is dynamic, fluid, and always becoming. For billions of years, this cycle has continued. Lava becomes basalt, basalt erodes into sand, sand becomes sandstone, and sandstone once again melts into magma. Each transformation is a sentence rewritten, yet the meaning never disappears. The minerals may change their arrangement, but the story remains one of heat, pressure, and motion. This is how the Earth keeps its past alive, not in stillness, but in movement. When human beings arrived much later, they built their lives upon this memory without realizing it. The stones beneath their feet carried the history of all who had come before, of worlds they would never know, of climates and creatures that no longer existed. The mountains they climbed were ancient scars healed by time. The rivers they followed had carved their beds through eons of stone. Even the soil they tilled was the product of endless weathering, the dust of once great ranges reduced to fertile earth. Every human home, every road, every temple is made from the bones of the planet's memory. In some places, the Earth reveals its story plainly. Cliffs that rise from the sea, canyons carved open by rivers, layers exposed to light for the first time in millions of years. Standing before such places is to stand before time itself. The strata, stacked one upon another, are like pages in an ancient book. The lower ones tell of seas that vanished. The upper ones speak of forests, deserts, and ice. Each layer is an age, each fossil a voice that whispers across epochs. The Earth does not forget, it only speaks very slowly. When we hold a stone in our hand, we hold an echo of that slowness. The rock does not rush, it endures. It has existed through more dawns than we can imagine, through storms and suns, through the rise and fall of entire species. Its texture, its weight, its quiet strength are reminders of continuity of the steady presence that underlies all change. Stone teaches patience. It reminds us that even the smallest pebble carries the memory of mountains and the imprint of time's unbroken flow. The deep memory of stone also carries silence, not emptiness, but the stillness of comprehension. Within that silence is a kind of wisdom, the knowledge that all things are transient, yet nothing is truly lost. The stone erodes, but its particles live on. The mountain crumbles, but its dust becomes fertile soil. Even destruction serves creation. The Earth's memory is not linear. It circles endlessly, blending what was with what is, and what will be. If one could listen to the Earth beneath its crust, one might hear a kind of slow heartbeat, the pulse of tectonic motion, the murmur of shifting layers, the quiet grind of stone against stone. It would be a sound without urgency, a rhythm of deep time. Every tremor, every earthquake, every eruption is part of that same language, the way the Earth turns its pages and rewrites its story. The stones, in their simplicity, are the keepers of all that endures. They have witnessed the first light, the birth of life, the extinction of countless species, and the slow unfolding of everything that came after. And though they cannot speak, their shapes, their colors, their layers tell us everything we need to know about where we came from. To study them is to read the autobiography of the planet, a book written without ink, bound not in paper, but in the elements themselves. When rain falls on stone, it is time meeting memory. When wind carves the side of a cliff, it is time rewriting what it once wrote before. And when we walk across the ground, we walk upon a story so vast that even the stars seem young beside it. The Earth remembers in silence, and through that silence, it speaks. The deep memory of stone is the world's most faithful witness, patient, enduring, and eternal. 14. The arrival of thought, humanity enters the text. For billions of years, the earth had written its story in silence. It had shaped mountains and oceans, forests and deserts, creatures of the sea and sky, all without witness, all without awareness. Time had been the sole author, tracing its letters in stone and light, in wind and erosion. But eventually, through countless generations of adaptation and chance, one species emerged that could read what time had written, one being that could wonder, remember, and dream. It was the arrival of thought, the quiet awakening of the universe within itself. Humanity had entered the text. It began humbly, as all great changes do. The earliest humans were not so different from the world around them. They walked among the tall grasses and trees, drinking from rivers, sleeping beneath stars. Their bodies carried the ancient chemistry of the oceans, the minerals of mountains, the breath of forests. They were of the earth, not separate from it, shaped by the same patient forces that had shaped everything else. And yet, within their minds, something new was stirring, an awareness that could not be measured by bone or muscle. For the first time, the planet was beginning to think. The earliest sparks of consciousness were not grand revelations, but small moments of recognition, a reflection in water, the glow of fire, the shape of a footprint pressed into the earth. These were the first mirrors, the first symbols, the beginnings of memory and imagination. Humanity's ancestors learned to understand patterns, the movement of stars, the rhythm of seasons, the behavior of animals. From this awareness grew knowledge, and from knowledge came meaning. The mind, once quiet as the stones beneath their feet, began to speak. Language was perhaps the first miracle of thought. It allowed ideas to move from one being to another, to live beyond a single lifetime. Words were not only sounds, they were vessels of memory. With them, people began to describe the world, the wind, the rain, the fire, the sun, and in naming these things, they began to feel their connection to them. The earth, which had long written its story through motion and matter, now found its reflection in speech. The human voice became an extension of the planet's song, carrying the rhythms of nature into sound and story. As time passed, humans learned to use their hands to shape the world around them. Stone tools chipped into edges, fires tended and carried, shelters built from branches and earth. These acts were the first attempts to collaborate with time. Each invention was both an adaptation and a declaration, humanity learning not only to survive, but to create. With creation came memory, and with memory, the desire to record. The first carvings and cave paintings were not just art, they were the written whispers of consciousness, humanity's effort to join the story that had been unfolding since the dawn of the earth. The images drawn on cavern walls, animals, stars, human figures, were humanity's first written words, composed not of language but of understanding. They told of hunts and seasons, of reverence for the creatures that shared the land. They were a bridge between the tangible and the unseen, between the body and the mind. In those flickering torchlit chambers, humans began to realize that they were part of something larger, something that had no clear beginning or end. They looked up at the night sky and recognized patterns there too, seeing in the stars the same rhythms that shaped their lives below. The awareness of time followed soon after. Humans began to measure days by the movement of the sun, to mark the passage of years by the return of the rains. The cycles of the earth, sunrise and sunset, seed and harvest, birth and death became the foundation of their thought. They came to understand that everything moved in patterns, that change was constant but not chaotic. This realization was profound, for it mirrored the truth that the planet itself had always lived by, that nothing is lost, only transformed. Fire became their companion, their light against the darkness. Around it, they told stories, weaving knowledge and memory into tales that travelled across generations. Through these stories, the human mind expanded, connecting the physical world to the unseen world of ideas. Myth was born, the poetry of early thought, expressing truths too vast to measure. In myth, mountains became gods, rivers became spirits, and the stars were given names. The universe had become intimate, personal, and alive in the human imagination. The ability to think gave rise to the ability to ask, and with questions came wonder, a force as old as the stars, but newly awakened in human minds. Why do the seasons change? Why do the stars move? What lies beyond death? These questions became the quiet heartbeat of humanity's existence, driving exploration, art, and discovery. They were not questions of fear, but of belonging, the mind seeking to understand its place in the grand unfolding of time. As civilizations arose, humanity began to shape the earth more deliberately. Settlements became cities, farming replaced foraging. The rhythm of nature was now joined by the rhythm of human creation: walls, roads, temples, and tools. The marks left upon the land grew deeper, and the relationship between people and planet grew more complex. Yet even in their great works, humans continued to echo the natural world. Their buildings resembled mountains, their fires mirrored the sun, their rivers of trade flowed like water through valleys. The earth had taught them its language, and they spoke it through design and art. The written word emerged as the next great evolution of thought. From clay tablets and inked scrolls to paper and stone, humans found new ways to preserve memory. Writing extended consciousness beyond the body, allowing ideas to travel across distance and time. It was as though humanity had found its own form of geology, a way to layer its history, to leave behind traces that others could one day read. Every text became a fossil of thought, an imprint of a moment in the vastness of existence. Philosophy, science, and art all grew from this foundation. The same curiosity that led the first humans to watch the stars now guided them to study the earth itself. They learned of the mountain's age, of the fossils within stone, of the invisible laws that governed motion and light, and with each discovery, they found themselves reflected in the cosmos, small yet infinite, fragile yet enduring. The universe was not separate from them, it was within them. The atoms that made their minds had once burned in the hearts of stars. As humanity evolved, it became both reader and writer of the Earth's story. The planet no longer moved in silence, it spoke through human awareness. The wind was measured, the tides recorded, the passing of days transformed into calendars and clocks. Time, once invisible, became a companion. The human heart learned to feel its pulse, to measure its distance, to trace its flow backward into memory and forward into possibility. And yet, even in all their progress, humans remained deeply connected to the ancient rhythms that shaped them. The turning of seasons still guided their lives. The rising and setting sun still marked their days. The earth, patient as always, continued its motion, carrying humanity along its endless path through space. Thought, like life itself, had become another form of time's expression, the universe reflecting upon its own creation. The arrival of thought was not the end of the story, but its deepening. Through consciousness, the cosmos became self-aware, and the earth found a voice that could describe its own beauty. Humanity was both the reader and the next sentence, a bridge between matter and meaning, between creation and reflection. The universe, through human eyes, had learned to see itself. Through human words, it had learned to speak. And though civilizations would rise and fall, though empires would fade into dust like ancient mountains, the echo of that awareness would endure. For once thought had entered the world, it could not be undone. The story had grown larger, richer, more intricate. The earth had found a new way to dream through minds that could imagine eternity, through hearts that could feel the passage of time. Humanity was the continuation of the same story, written in a new voice, carried by the same eternal hand. 15. The chorus of civilizations. When the dawn of thought gave rise to memory, and the memory grew into story, humanity began to sing in chorus with the earth itself. Civilization was not born in a single moment, nor in a single place. It was a slow and gentle awakening that spread across the continents like the light of morning, one fire at a time. From the banks of rivers to the edges of deserts, from the mountain valleys to the endless plains, people began to gather, to build, and to weave their lives together. In that joining, something larger than any one mind began to form the collective rhythm of civilizations, the great chorus of humankind. The first notes of this song were humble and earthly. They began where water met land, where rivers carved their patient paths through fertile soil. Along the Tigris and Euphrates, the Nile, the Indus, and the Yellow River, humanity found the perfect balance between sustenance and stability. The earth gave generously, grain that swayed in the wind, clay that could be shaped into walls, and animals that could be tamed and guided. Villages grew from these gifts, and soon cities rose, not in defiance of nature, but but in conversation with it. Humanity had learned to echo the patterns of the world, creating structures that reflected the order they saw in the stars and seasons. Each civilization added its own voice to the song. The people of Mesopotamia looked to the heavens and traced the movements of constellations, recording them upon tablets of clay. They mapped the flow of time through celestial rhythms, learning that the heavens too were a kind of clock. The Egyptians, guided by the Nile's eternal cycle, built monuments aligned with the stars, believing that life and death were not opposites, but reflections of the same eternal return. In the valleys of the Indus, cities grew in quiet symmetry, their streets laid with purpose, their walls designed to breathe with wind and shade. Across the ocean, in the early lands of the Americas, the same pulse was heard: maize sprouting under the sun, stone, temples rising from jungles, the human spirit finding its place within the vastness of the living world. Civilization, at its heart, was an act of memory. It was humanity's effort to preserve what time would otherwise erase, to capture knowledge, to honor ancestors, to give permanence to the fleeting. In art and architecture, in song and scripture, people recorded not only their achievements but their wonder. Every monument, every written word, every carved symbol was an offering to time itself, a plea to be remembered. The earth had kept its own records in stone and fossil. Now humanity began to write alongside it, adding the lines of language and imagination. As these civilizations flourished, they began to speak not only to the earth but to each other. Through trade and travel, through migration and war, ideas moved like pollen carried by the wind. Words, stories, technologies and beliefs flowed from one culture to another, transforming as they traveled. Bronze and iron, mathematics and myth, art and philosophy all crossed the boundaries of geography to become part of a shared inheritance. Humanity was learning that it was not many isolated worlds, but one vast and interwoven being. Still, the song of civilization was not always harmonious. The same creativity that built temples also built weapons. The same fire that warmed hearths could burn cities. Time, impartial as ever, allowed both creation and destruction to coexist. Kingdoms rose, gleaming in splendor, and then fell to dust. Empires stretched their borders wide, only to crumble back into the soil that birthed them. Yet each collapse left traces behind, fragments of wisdom, art, and language that would seed the next age. In this way, even destruction became a form of renewal, another verse in the Earth's long song of transformation. Humanity, for all its striving, never truly left the rhythm of nature. The rising of the sun still guided its days. The phases of the moon still shaped its months. Festivals and rituals marked the solstices, harvests and floods, reminders that human time was only a reflection of cosmic time. The temples that reached toward the heavens were not built to escape the world, but to honor it, to align human life with the movements of the stars, to remind all who entered that the universe was not distant, but present in every breath. In Greece, thought turned inward and outward at once. Philosophers began to ask not only how the world worked, but what it meant to be alive within it. They sought patterns in logic and proportion, believing that truth was woven into the symmetry of existence. Across the world in China, sages observed the balance between forces, the yin and yang, the harmony of opposites, and saw that wisdom lay in following the natural order rather than resisting it. In India, thinkers described the universe as a vast cycle of creation and dissolution, where every being, every star, every moment was part of a cosmic rhythm without beginning or end. The chorus of civilizations was not a single melody, but a great harmony of countless voices. Some sang of gods and heavens, others of lore and knowledge. Some built pyramids that touched the clouds, while others raised gardens that mirrored paradise. Across all of them ran the same thread, a desire to understand, to create meaning, to leave a mark upon the ever-turning wheel of time. Humanity had learned to see itself as both participant and observer, both mortal and eternal. Art became the purest expression of this awareness. Painters, sculptors and poets became translators between the visible and the invisible. In their hands, stone became spirit, words became music, and sound became emotion. Through their creations, the human heart spoke across centuries, bridging distance and death. Even as civilizations vanished, their art remained, whispering their truths into future ages. The echo of their voices carried onward, soft, persistent, eternal. With each passing generation, humanity grew more complex, its understanding deeper, its reach wider. The earth, once vast and mysterious, became more familiar, yet never less wondrous. Maps replaced myths, but the yearning for the unknown remained. Exploration became the new form of reverence, science, a continuation of ancient curiosity. And yet, beneath all the discovery, a quiet truth endured that everything humanity learned about the universe, it had always known in its bones. For the body, too, was made of the same elements as the stars it studied, the same dust that had once been mountains and seas. Civilization, in all its forms, has always been a conversation between the human and the eternal. It is a song sung by many voices, rising and falling with time, blending sorrow with triumph, silence with sound. Though its notes change, the melody remains an affirmation of life, of thought, of belonging. Humanity, through its art and cities, its faith and science, continues to sing the same ancient refrain that began in the first ripple of the sea, the first flicker of lightning, the first spark of life. And even now, though countless civilizations have come and gone, their voices linger in the stones, in the wind, in the pulse of culture that continues through us. We are their continuation, their echo, their unfinished verse. Time still writes, and we still speak. The chorus of civilizations is not a memory of what once was, it is the living breath of what always will be. Humanity is still singing, softly but unceasingly, carrying forward the song of the earth, the music of existence, the eternal harmony between creation and time. 16. The mirror of stars night has always been a moment of reflection for the earth, a time when the noise of the day falls away and the sky opens its quiet page to the eyes of those who look upward. Long before telescopes, before science and measurement, the stars were the oldest mirrors that humanity ever knew. They shimmered across the darkness like a memory the universe had written for itself, reminding every living thing that existence stretches beyond the horizon of what can be touched. The mirror of stars has always waited above, patient and eternal, reflecting not only the cosmos but the thoughts of those who gaze into it. When the first humans looked at the stars, they did not see distant suns. They saw patterns, stories, and familiar shapes. Constellations became their first maps, guiding travelers across deserts and oceans, marking the turning of seasons and offering comfort to those who wandered far from home. In the stillness of night, these early observers began to feel a kinship with the sky. It was a vast reflection of their own minds, mysterious, infinite, and filled with unspoken meaning. The stars became both teachers and companions, symbols of permanence in a world that was always changing. In every ancient culture, the heavens held a sacred place. The Egyptians aligned their pyramids with the belt of Orion, believing the stars were gateways for the soul. The Babylonians traced planetary movements with such devotion that their records became the foundation of astronomy itself. In Greece, philosophers stared upward and wondered whether the stars were holes in a great dark sphere through which divine light shone. Far across the world, in China, stargazers kept meticulous watch over celestial patterns, reading in them the cycles of fate and fortune. And among the peoples of the Americas, the Milky Way was not merely a cluster of stars, but a river of souls, a luminous bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. Through all these different visions, one truth endured, that the sky was not separate from the earth, but an extension of it. Humanity sensed that the same forces that shaped the mountains and oceans also guided the stars in their motion. The constellations above were reflections of the stories below, human myths woven into cosmic fabric. The night sky became the canvas of memory, carrying the imaginations of countless generations. Every story told beneath those lights, every whisper of prayer or wonder, became part of the same vast reflection. As time passed, the human gaze grew sharper and thought grew deeper. The invention of the telescope turned curiosity into vision. For the first time, eyes could see beyond what the naked sight allowed: the craters of the moon, the swirling storms of Jupiter, the countless stars invisible to the human eye. The heavens, once thought to be a perfect and unchanging realm, were revealed to be dynamic, full of motion and transformation. The mirror of stars was no longer a fixed backdrop. It was a living expanse, a cosmos still being written. humanity's understanding of its place within it shifted forever. The realization that the Earth was not the center of creation but a single world among countless others was at first a shock, and then a revelation. It humbled the mind and expanded it at once. The same elements that burned in the distant suns were found within the human body. The same cosmic dust that drifted across interstellar space formed the bones, the blood, the breath of those who observed it. The connection between earth and sky was not metaphorical, it was literal. The stars were not beyond humanity, they were within it. To look upward was to look inward, to see the ancient origins of one's own being mirrored in light. Science deepened this realization, but it did not erase the wonder. The astronomers who charted the galaxies, who measured distances unthinkably vast, did so with awe as much as with logic. The poets, the dreamers, the seekers, each found their reflection there as well. For even as equations replaced myths, the mystery remained. The stars continued to whisper, and humanity continued to listen, finding in their shimmer the same quiet invitation. To remember that everything is connected, that all light is shared. The stars also taught the lesson of time. Their light, travelling across millions or billions of years, arrived as a message from the past. To look at a star was to look backward through history, to see it not as it is, but as it once was. Some of the lights visible in the night sky have already vanished, their suns long gone, their glow only now reaching us. In this way, the universe reminds us of its dual nature. It is vast, yet intimate, ancient, yet immediate. The light of the stars is the handwriting of time, crossing endless space to rest softly upon the eyes of those who dream beneath it. When people began to venture into space, the mirror grew closer. The first astronauts who looked back at Earth from beyond its atmosphere described a feeling beyond words. From that distant vantage point, the planet appeared fragile, a single glowing sphere adrift in a dark sea, its oceans and clouds swirling in quiet unity. Borders vanished, divisions disappeared, and the Earth revealed itself as one living being. For the first time, humanity could see what the stars had always known, that everything on Earth is connected, not by nation or name, but by existence itself. That view from space changed something deep within the collective mind. It rekindled a sense of belonging, not just to a country or culture, but to the cosmos. The same awareness that had once filled ancient stargazers returned, reshaped by knowledge yet softened by humility. The universe was not a cold expanse of void and silence, but a place filled with patterns of light, with the same quiet intelligence that had given rise to thought. In that reflection, humanity saw its own face small, yes, but luminous. Even now, as telescopes gaze farther than ever before, as machines drift beyond the reach of our voices into the endless dark, the stars continue to speak. They tell of galaxies colliding, of stars being born in clouds of fire, of the slow and beautiful death of light. And yet, in all that movement and immensity, there remains a profound stillness. The universe does not rush. Its story unfolds in the rhythm of eons, the same rhythm that beats in the heart of every living thing. The mirror of stars remains above us, unchanged in its mystery. It invites reflection not only of what is beyond, but of what is within. It reminds us that consciousness itself is an echo of the cosmos, that to think, to dream, to wonder, is to participate in the same act of creation that first scattered light across the void. Each star we see is both a memory and a promise, a memory of what has been and a promise of what may still come. Perhaps that is why people continue to look upward, night after night, generation after generation. The stars have no voices, yet they speak to something ancient in us, a longing to understand where we came from and where we are going. They remind us that though we are small, we are made of infinite things. Though we are fleeting, we are part of something eternal. The same elements that blaze in their distant cores burn quietly within our veins. We are not beneath the stars, we are of them. And so, the gaze continues. The earth turns, the sky shifts, the constellations rise and fade, but the act of looking endures. Humanity, ever curious, ever seeking, continues to read the light written across the heavens. The stars, patient as always, reflect back the gaze, shining with the quiet knowing of time. Between the two, the watcher and the watched, there is harmony. The mirror holds both light and shadow, past and present, eternity and now. The stars are the eyes of time, and through them, the universe watches itself unfold. Humanity, standing beneath that endless sky, is both observer and participant, both question and answer. The story continues, written not in ink or stone, but in light eternal, distant, and endlessly reflected. The mirror of stars will never fade, for it is not only above us, it is within us, glowing softly in every thought that dares to look upward and wonder. 17. The pulse of memory. Memory is the soft heartbeat of time, invisible, rhythmic, and unending. It does not live only in the mind, nor does it belong solely to humankind. It is written into the fabric of the earth itself, woven through the air, the oceans, and even the stars. Every atom remembers the moment it was born. Every breeze carries traces of what came before. Memory is not just recollection. It is the pulse that connects all that has been to all that will ever be. It is the invisible thread that binds creation together. From the first cell that divided in the depths of the ancient ocean to the first human who traced a symbol upon stone, memory has guided existence. The simplest organisms carried within them the instructions of survival, passing them on through generations in the language of genes. The body, in its quiet way, remembers everything: the shape of a hand, the rhythm of a heartbeat, the pattern of breathing inherited from those who came before. Our bones remember gravity, our skin remembers the warmth of the sun, and our minds remember stories older than civilization. Memory, like the tide, flows through all forms of life. Even before there was awareness, there was remembrance. The earth itself remembers in its own slow, deliberate manner. The cliffs and canyons hold the marks of rivers long vanished. The layers of ice remember the air of ancient ages, preserving it in frozen crystal. The rocks beneath our feet remember the pressure of mountains that have long since worn away. Time does not erase, it transforms. Every grain of sand that blows across a desert was once part of something else. A mountain, a shore, a star. Nothing is ever truly lost. It merely changes form and continues onward, carried by the pulse of memory. In the human mind, memory takes a new shape, fluid, fragile, yet enduring. It is both gift and mystery. The ability to remember gives meaning to time. It creates a sense of continuity, of self. Through memory, each person becomes both present and past, both singular and infinite. We remember laughter, faces, places, and dreams. But beyond these lie deeper memories, not personal ones, but inherited echoes of ancient experience. There are moments when a sound, a scent, or a fleeting image feels older than we are, as though we are remembering something from before our birth. Perhaps we are, for the human brain carries the residue of all who came before it, the imprints of survival, of fear, of joy, of connection. Our minds are not blank pages. They are continuations of a story that began long before we opened our eyes. Civilizations too remember. In their art, their architecture, their language, and their rituals, they preserve the collective memory of humanity. A temple, worn by centuries of wind, is more than stone, it is the memory of devotion. A book written 1,000 years ago is more than words, it is a voice from the past speaking into the present. Music, when played, reawakens the memory of emotions that transcend generations. Every culture carries its own rhythm of remembrance, and together they form the great pulse of human history. But memory is not fixed. It moves, it fades, it reshapes itself with time. Just as rivers change their course, so too does memory alter its flow. Some memories strengthen, others dissolve into myth. The ancient cities buried beneath sand, the languages forgotten, the names erased from stone, all these are forms of memory that have shifted into silence. Yet even silence remembers. The dust that covers forgotten ruins still holds traces of the voices that once filled them. The wind that moves through abandoned temples carries faint echoes of songs once sung. Memory does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter. Within each human being, memory pulses in harmony with the heart. It sustains identity, yet it also reaches beyond it. When we remember those we have lost, we keep them alive in another form. When we tell stories to children, we pass memory forward into futures we will not see. Each act of remembrance is an act of creation, the reweaving of time's fabric. Memory gives continuity to existence, ensuring that no moment, however brief, truly vanishes. The earth itself participates in this remembrance. The rain that falls upon the land carries with it the memory of clouds, of seas, of mountains. The water we drink has cycled through the veins of life for billions of years. It has touched the scales of ancient fish, the roots of long-dead trees, the lips of our ancestors. Every drop is a traveller, carrying stories of the world through endless transformation. To drink water is to taste the memory of time. And beyond the earth, the stars too remember. The light that reaches us tonight left its source long before we existed. To look at the night sky is to look into the memory of the universe, to see moments from billions of years ago still shimmering with life. The cosmos itself carries the memory of its own birth in the faint radiation that fills the space between galaxies. Even in the vast emptiness, nothing is forgotten. Memory is the very nature of existence. It is what allows the universe to evolve, to build upon what it has been. As humanity grew, memory became both burden and gift. We learned to record it in ways the body could not, in writing, in images, in music, in machines. We built libraries and monuments, archives and devices to preserve what might otherwise fade. And yet, even as our capacity to remember expanded, so did our fragility. We learned that memory can be selective, that it can distort as easily as it preserves. The same mind that remembers truth can also shape illusion. History, too, becomes a mirror, reflecting not only what was, but how we choose to see it. Still, despite its imperfections, memory is what allows love, art, and identity to exist. It is what lets us learn from mistakes and cherish beauty. It is the bridge between what is gone and what remains. Every moment of connection, a glance, a word, a gesture is recorded somewhere, in neurons, in air, in matter itself. The pulse of memory does not stop when life ends. It continues through those who remember, through the earth that holds the remnants of our presence. Perhaps memory is the universe's way of loving itself, of ensuring that nothing it creates is ever truly lost. Every song sung, every thought conceived, every act of kindness or cruelty becomes part of the grand accumulation of being. Time absorbs everything, yet it keeps the essence intact. The wind that moves through the trees carries the same rhythm as the pulse in our veins. The ocean that laps against the shore carries the same repetition as memory itself. A cycle of returning, of remembering, of becoming again. To live, then, is to remember. To breathe is to participate in the memory of air. To walk upon the ground is to move through the memory of mountains. To speak, to dream, to love. These are all acts of remembering the universe's own creation. The pulse of memory beats in all things, from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy. It is the quiet, eternal heartbeat of time itself. And one day, long after humanity has faded, long after the last words have been spoken and the last lights have dimmed, that pulse will still endure. The stones will still carry their ancient weight. The stars will still shine with the memory of their own beginnings. The universe will continue to remember itself, eternally writing and rereading its story, each moment a reflection of the last. For in truth, memory is not what remains after time. Memory is time. It is the unbroken rhythm that moves through creation, connecting all things in a single, continuous breath. It beats now, softly, in you the pulse of the earth, the echo of the stars, the quiet remembrance of everything that has ever been. 18. The dreaming earth. There are moments quiet and endless, when the world seems to exhale, when wind moves softly through the grass, when the sea glimmers under the pale moon, when mountains stand still against the slow drift of clouds. In such moments, the earth feels alive in a way that goes beyond motion or sound. It feels as though the planet is dreaming not with the fleeting visions of creatures, but with a deep and timeless consciousness. The dreaming earth is not a metaphor, but a rhythm, a long and patient awareness that has existed since the first stone cooled, since the first wave rolled across the newborn ocean. Every part of the planet participates in this dream. The forests dream in chlorophyll and sunlight, their leaves trembling in whispers of memory. The oceans dream in currents and tides, repeating their liquid mantra across millennia. Even the mountains, ancient and immovable, dream in silence, their slopes and summits recording the rise and fall of ages, their very shapes shaped by the passage of wind, water, and time. It is a dream that never ends, unfolding in cycles rather than lines, in pulses rather than words. The Earth does not dream of what will be, it dreams of what is the eternal now that stretches across all time. For most of its history, the planet dreamed alone. Its thoughts were written in the movement of continents, in the growth of forests, in the migration of clouds. Its breathing was measured in the slow exhalation of volcanoes and the deep inhalation of the seas. It dreamed of balance of fire and water, air and stone, light and dark. And then, in time, as life began to bloom and evolve, that dream became more intricate. The dreamer had found a way to dream within itself. Life was not separate from the planet. It was the continuation of its dreaming in new form. Each living thing became a fragment of the planet's imagination, a small, temporary expression of its boundless creativity. The roots of trees reached into the soil, speaking to the stones that remembered ancient fire. The leaves reached toward the light, drawing energy from the stars. Animals, in their movements and instincts, mirrored the rhythms of the Earth's own cycles, migrations following the turning of seasons, songs echoing the winds, births and deaths, aligning with the patterns of the moon. The Earth was dreaming through them all, weaving its living tapestry of experience. When consciousness finally bloomed within humanity, it was as though the Earth had opened its eyes from within. Through human thought, the planet became aware of its own story. The rivers that had always flowed, the mountains that had always stood, now had witnesses. Through human memory and language, the dream of the Earth became self-reflective. It could now name itself, describe itself, wonder at itself. Humanity was not separate from the dream. It was a deeper layer of it, a moment when the universe looked back upon its own creation and recognized its reflection. And yet, with awareness came distance. As humans learned to shape the world, they began to forget that they were part of its dreaming. Cities rose from stone, fields replaced forests, and machines hummed in place of rivers. The noise of civilization grew louder, and the quiet pulse of the planet became harder to hear. The Earth still dreamed, but its dream was obscured by the fever of human thought, the endless motion of progress, the rush of invention. In trying to master nature, humanity began to forget its origins within it. But the Earth does not forget. Its dreaming continues, patient and endless, waiting to be remembered. In rare moments of stillness, when a person stands upon a mountaintop or walks along a quiet shore, that ancient awareness returns. The air feels different, vast, calm, full of presence. It is as if the Earth is whispering through the wind, reminding its children that they are not alone, that they are not visitors here, but part of something immense and alive. The ocean's waves repeat the same words over and over, the same syllables of existence. The forest hums softly with a language too old for speech. These are not separate things, they are the same dream, shared by everything that lives. Some traditions have always understood this. The indigenous peoples of the world have long spoken of the Earth as a living being, one that breathes, feels, and remembers. They saw no division between rock and spirit, between human and land. To them, every tree had a story, every mountain a guardian, every stream a song. Their ceremonies were not acts of worship but of communication, harmonizing human life with the rhythm of the greater dream. In this understanding, the Earth is not an object to be used but a consciousness to be honored, an ancient intelligence whose wisdom lies in its silence. Science, too, in its own way, has begun to rediscover this truth. The Earth's systems, its atmosphere, its waters, its crust, and its life are interconnected in ways so intricate that they behave almost like a single organism. The forests exhale the air that animals breathe. The oceans absorb the heat that the sky cannot hold. Microbes in the soil regulate the chemistry of entire ecosystems. It is all one vast and delicate balance, a planetary pulse that has persisted for billions of years. The Earth is not merely alive with life, it is alive as life. When seen this way, even the smallest action becomes part of the dream's unfolding. A leaf falling from a branch, a bird taking flight, a drop of rain landing upon stone, each is both ordinary and sacred, a single heartbeat in the rhythm of creation. The Earth dreams not in human time, but in geological time, in cosmic time. Its dreams stretch across eras, and though we may seem brief and fleeting, we too are woven into that continuity. Every breath we take, every footprint we leave, becomes part of the planet's ongoing story. There are times when the Earth's dream turns restless, when fire, storm, or ice reshape its surface. These are not punishments or endings, but transitions, moments of renewal. The Earth does not destroy, it transforms. In its dreaming there is no fear, no loss, only change. Even when humanity faces the consequences of its own forgetfulness, the planet continues to adapt. The dream adjusts, reshapes, and waits. It has endured meteors and ice ages, extinctions and rebirths. It will endure us too, and perhaps one day, through us. For though humanity often forgets, there is still something within us that remembers. It speaks in the hush before dawn, in the rhythm of waves against the shore, in the feeling of soil between the fingers. It whispers when we are quiet enough to listen. It tells us that we belong, that the same force that turns the stars also turns our hearts. It is the reminder that we are not apart from the dreaming Earth. We are the part of it that dreams of itself. If the Earth is dreaming, then humanity is its imagination. Through us, the planet paints, sings, builds, and contemplates. Our art, our science, our wonder, all are expressions of the same ancient desire to create, to understand, to become. We are not intruders in the world's story, but its continuation. The Earth dreams through us as much as through the rivers and the trees. One day, when the noise of our age has quieted, when the cities have returned to dust and the oceans have reshaped the shores once more, the Earth will still be dreaming. The wind will still move across its surface, carrying the songs of distant waves. The stars will still rise above it, and the night will still cradle it in silence. The dream will continue, as it always has, unbroken and eternal. The dreaming Earth is not waiting for us to awaken, it is we who are waiting to remember. To close our eyes and feel the rhythm of the ground beneath us, to hear the quiet pulse that has never ceased. In that stillness, everything becomes clear. The Earth is not our home because we live upon it. It is our home because we are part of its dream, and as long as the world turns, that dream will go on gentle, vast, and everlasting. 19. The Symphony of Tomorrow. The future is not an arrival but a continuation, the next movement in the same unending song that began when the first light filled the universe. It unfolds not in sudden leaps but in the same quiet rhythm that has guided all of creation, the rhythm of evolution, of learning, of remembering. The Earth, still dreaming, carries this melody forward, and humanity, as one of its newest instruments, plays its part in the great symphony of tomorrow. Every civilization that has ever risen upon this planet has imagined the future in its own way. To the ancients, tomorrow was a cycle, the return of the sun, the rebirth of the moon, the renewal of the seasons. To later minds it became a horizon, something to move toward with effort and will. And now, standing at the edge of our own age, we see tomorrow as something both fragile and infinite, a place shaped by our choices, yet held within forces far greater than our control. The future has always been a mirror reflecting who we are in the present, and how we choose to listen to the song of the world. The Earth will continue to change, as it always has. Its continents will drift, its climate will shift, its winds will rewrite the landscapes we know. The forests will breathe, the seas will rise and fall, and the stars will continue their silent passage across the sky. The planet is older than memory and wiser than prediction. Whatever humanity becomes, whatever it builds or destroys, it remains part of the same living cycle, a single thread woven into the eternal fabric of time. Yet within that thread lies something new, awareness. The power to imagine the next verse of creation consciously. In every age, humanity has stood at a threshold. The discovery of fire, the birth of language, the rise of cities, the unlocking of the atom, each was both a beginning and a question. Now we stand at another, one where the future of the Earth seems balanced between wonder and uncertainty. The tools we have created hold the potential to heal or to harm, to unify or to divide. Our machines hum with a quiet intelligence that reflects our own, yet also challenges us to understand what it means to be alive. In this moment, time listens. It waits to see what melody we will add to its ongoing song. The symphony of tomorrow will not be written by technology alone, nor by ambition, but by awareness. The awareness that everything we do echoes through the greater world. Each act, no matter how small, sends ripples through the web of life. The The forests we plant or cut down, the energy we draw from the earth, the way we speak to one another, all of it becomes part of the music. We are not only listeners but composers, shaping the harmony or the dissonance of what is to come. Already the planet sings with a new and complex sound. The hum of cities merges with the whisper of wind, the pulse of machines with the rhythm of rain. Satellites circle in the upper atmosphere like metallic birds, sending messages that bind the world together in invisible threads. The night sky, once silent and remote, now carries faint signals of human thought drifting through space. We have begun to expand the chorus of Earth into the cosmos, adding our voices to the universal song that began long before us. Yet beneath all the innovation and movement, the deeper rhythm remains unchanged. The soil still breathes beneath our feet. The tide still pulls upon the shore. The stars still burn in patient silence. If there is to be a future worth dreaming, it must grow from harmony with these ancient patterns, not from conquest over them. The true progress of tomorrow will not be measured by what we build, but by what we remember the knowledge that every creation must serve the balance of the whole. In this future, perhaps humanity will rediscover a gentler way of being, a way in which science and spirit are not opposed but intertwined, where technology mirrors the elegance of natural systems rather than replacing them. Perhaps our cities will one day hum like forests, alive with clean energy and living walls of green. Perhaps our machines will learn from the quiet efficiency of leaves and rivers, their movements guided by the same laws that govern wind and water. When we learn to imitate the wisdom of the earth instead of trying to dominate it, the world will begin to heal. The song will find its balance once more. It may be that humanity will leave this planet one day, traveling to the distant reaches of the cosmos. Yet wherever we go, we will carry the earth within us in our cells, in our breath, in our memory. The blue of our oceans will live in our eyes. The gravity of our home will live in our hearts. We will build new worlds, but each will be a reflection of this one, for there is no escaping our origin. The earth is not simply the place from which we come, it is the living note from which our entire song began. And perhaps, far into the future, long after our age has faded, the earth will continue to dream in other forms. New life will rise from the remnants of ours, shaped by climates and landscapes we cannot imagine. The forests will shift, the seas will sing with new voices, and the sky will shimmer with unfamiliar constellations. Time will continue its endless symphony, and the music will never truly end, only change, as it always has. But even now, as we move through the present, we can hear the faint melody of what is coming. It hums through the pulse of electricity, through the wind that moves the turbines, through the quiet rhythm of a heartbeat that pauses in wonder. The future is already here, unfolding in every act of kindness, in every idea born of curiosity rather than fear. Each generation adds its own measure to the music, carrying forward the dream that began long before words or fire or stars. To imagine tomorrow is not to predict it, but to listen to the deep pulse of the earth, to the faint whisper of the cosmos, to the still voice within ourselves that remembers we are part of something vast. The future is not a destination, it is a song still being written, and we are both the instrument and the player. Our choices shape its tone, our awareness its harmony. Every thought, every breath, every step is a note in that unfolding melody. When we look toward the horizon and feel the quiet hope that something beautiful might yet come, that is the earth dreaming through us once more. Its song flows through our hands, our hearts, our inventions, our words. We are the continuation of its music, the echo of its ancient rhythm, rising again in new form. The symphony of tomorrow has already begun. It hums softly through the trees, through the cities, through the silence between stars. And as time moves onward, long after our voices fade, the melody will remain. It will travel through oceans and atmospheres, through stone and light, through every atom that was ever part of us. The earth will keep dreaming, the universe will keep singing, and the song of tomorrow will go on vast, tender and eternal, carried on the breath of time itself. 20. The story that never ends. There is a quiet truth that lives beneath all things, that nothing truly ends. Every wave that reaches the shore returns to the sea. Every breath released into the air becomes part of another's lungs. Every star that burns away scatters its light into the darkness, becoming the dust from which new worlds are born. Time, in its infinite patience, does not write in periods but in commas, in pauses, in the soft continuations that link all existence together. The story of the earth, the story of life, the story of us. It is not a tale that concludes. It is a story that never ends. From the first spark of energy that began the cosmos, everything has been in motion. Not toward an ending, but toward transformation. The atoms that make our hands once burned in the cores of ancient stars. The air we breathe has passed through the lungs of creatures long vanished. The light that touches our eyes tonight left its source before our species even existed. We are not separate from this continuity. We are made of it. The universe is not a distant expanse we live within. It is the story living through us. The earth itself is an echo of that unbroken tale. Across its billions of years, it has changed its face countless times, from molten fire to oceanic blue, from barren stone to forests alive with song. It has written, erased, and rewritten its surface again and again, each layer of rock another page in its quiet autobiography. Yet even as mountains crumble and seas shift, the essence remains. The planet endures not through resistance but through renewal. It has never stopped becoming. The earth is not the stage of life's story. It is one of its main characters, breathing and dreaming and remembering across the vast theatre of time. Within this endless motion, life itself is the story's most eloquent expression. From the first cell that divided in the ocean's depths, to the endless diversity of beings that now inhabit every corner of the world, life has carried forward the same message that existence desires to continue, to change, to know itself. Each creature, each heartbeat, each generation adds its own verse to the symphony. Even in extinction, life does not vanish. It transforms. Its patterns re-emerge, its energy reshapes, its memory persists. There is no final act, only new beginnings written over and over by the same unseen hand. And now, in this brief and luminous age of humanity, the story has become aware of itself. Through thought, through language, through love and curiosity, the universe has learned to reflect. When we wonder where we come from, when we look at the stars and feel both small and infinite, that is the story remembering itself through us. We are not its authors, but its living pages, filled with ink that thinks, dreams, and questions. The mind is the mirror through which the cosmos sees its own reflection, the moment when matter becomes memory, and memory becomes meaning. It can be tempting to think of history as something behind us, and the future as something waiting ahead. But in truth, they are one continuous flow. The past is not gone, it lives within every cell, every breath, every thought. The future is not elsewhere, it is already forming in the choices we make, in the seeds we plant, in the kindness we give or withhold. Time is not a straight line, but a living spiral, always returning, always expanding. What has been, will be again, not as repetition but as resonance, the same melody played in ever new forms. The story continues in ways both grand and quiet. It continues in the rivers that carve new paths through the land, in the coral that builds slow cathedrals beneath the sea, in the forests that reclaim abandoned cities. It continues in the laughter of children, in the rhythm of the tides, in the light of distant galaxies that will shine long after our species has faded. The universe does not stop to mourn or to celebrate. It simply continues, carrying forward all that was into all that will be. Continuity is its nature, and wonder is its language. Even endings, when they come, are only transformations disguised as silence. When a star dies, it releases everything it has ever held: its light, its heat, its elements, scattering them into space to form new suns, new planets, new beginnings. When a tree falls, it feeds the soil that nurtures the next generation of growth. When a life ends, it returns its body to the world, its breath to the air, its memory to those who remain. Death, in its quiet way, is not the opposite of life, but its completion, the turning of a page so that another may begin. The same is true of civilizations. The great cities that once shone with brilliance now rest beneath layers of earth, but their essence continues in the languages we speak, the art we create, the questions we still ask. Humanity's story is not a straight ascent or a steady decline, but a series of waves rising, falling, and rising again. Each age builds upon the dreams of those before it, each generation adding a new voice to the chorus of existence. The song of civilization is one of adaptation and persistence, of remembering and rediscovering what it means to be alive, And what of time itself, that vast and invisible ocean in which all stories float? Time does not rush, nor does it slow. It simply unfolds. It holds within it every possibility, every path, every echo of what has ever been. It does not care for beginnings or endings. It is both and neither. Time is the canvas upon which existence paints, and the brush that moves the paint. In this endless act of creation, we are both artist and artwork, both fleeting and eternal. One day, the earth will change again. The continents will shift, the oceans will take new shapes, the sun will grow brighter, and eventually it too will fade. But even then, the story will not end. The elements of our world will drift into space, joining the cosmic dust that forms new stars, new worlds, new lives. Somewhere, in some distant corner of the galaxy, the particles that were once part of this planet will come together again, and the story will continue different but familiar. Perhaps, in another age, on another world, eyes will look up at a new sky and wonder, just as we have wondered. The universe will remember itself once more. The beauty of this endless story lies not in its conclusion, but in its continuity. Every ending is a return, every silence a prelude to new sound. The world does not seek closure, it seeks transformation. The same force that moves galaxies moves within us. The impulse to create, to love, to seek, to understand, to live is, to participate in the great unfolding, to carry the story forward in whatever way we can, however briefly we are here. And so, the story goes on in light and shadow, in death and birth, in the quiet places of the heart and the vast expanses of the cosmos. It flows through rivers and bloodlines, through memory and motion, through dreams and dust. The story is never finished, because it was never meant to be. It is infinite, like the breath of the earth, like the glow of the stars, like the whisper of time moving through eternity. The final truth is a gentle one. There is no final truth. There is only the continuation, the unfolding, the soft and endless becoming. We are part of a tale that has no last page, no closing word. We are made of beginnings, and we will return to them again and again. The earth will keep dreaming, the universe will keep singing, and time, the great and patient author, will keep writing, forever turning the pages of a story that never ends.